When I'm driving an F1 car, steering wheel feedback is one of the most important things. It helps me decide when to brake and how hard. It's how I feel the surface of the road. Every bump in the terrain, every wheel slip. If my tyres are starting to lose grip, I can sense that immediately. When I'm driving in a sim, I need that same tactility, that level of detail I have in a real car.
Racing games have come a long way in the last 20 years. Nothing's really changed in how we approach force feedback in all that time. Cutting-edge sims are now so realistic, drivers across all disciplines are using them for training. Our main goal when designing True Force was to improve the number of sensations that you actually feel, to put you better in contact with the car that you're driving so that you can improve your performance and that enjoyment of driving on a track. The physical feedback needs to be more immediate or accurate, or a player loses immersion or control.
Game developers are still having to recreate their force feedback from a set library of effects instead of deriving it from real-time modelling.
True Force is special because it levels the playing field for PC and console gamers. You're now getting the extra level of precision and detail that you need, regardless of which platform is your choice. This is not just iteration, it's total evolution. True Force force feedback works differently. It hooks directly into the physics engine of the game. Games already calculate the forces on the tyres and the steering wheel. The True Force algorithm is able to process this data at up to 4,000 times a second. It will even use the game's audio engine and pass it directly on to the driver.
We spend a lot of time as audio designers trying to make each car sound unique and as realistic as we possibly can. Being able to integrate the audio into the force feedback is something that we've wanted to do for a long time, and True Force enables us to do that. And the ability to send the audio to the wheel, to have it respond and vibrate with the loss of traction, really increases my ability to give that immersion to the player.
You can sense the changing surface of the road. You'll be able to feel if the back end of the car is losing grip.
The first time we had it running in the build, could feel the wheel humming and vibrating as we revved the engine. Our immediate reaction was it really adds another level of immersion.
The first thing you're going to feel with a True Force wheel is the engine note. The minute the engine starts in the game, you will know exactly which car you are driving. True Force is the beginning of something new. This is now the foundation for all wheels that we'll produce in the future. This extra level of information gives everyone all the information they need to learn how to control their car better. True Force benefits any racing fan looking for a more realistic driving experience.
Because winning is all about feeling.
It's motorsport, but not as you know it. Test yourself and your everyday road car. Safe, affordable, but most of all, fun. And all you need is your daily driver. Experience the thrill of a sprint day. Race against the clock at a hill climb. Or test your reflexes with an auto test. It takes just 3 simple steps to get started. Get on the start line. Search Motorsport Australia Daily Driver today.
Well, it's been a while, but we are finally back in a big way for round 5 here at Watkins Glen. Tonight, we head to the ball ring. 44 cars will go in, but how many will come out? This could be the pivotal race in the championship. There are tricks and traps everywhere that can catch you out at any time. James Scott is the unexpected leader of the series, a rookie who has a world of experience in other championships. He has certainly stepped up to the big time. Chasing him through are the TTR pair of Jake Burton and Madison Down, with Evolution Racing Team's Ethan Grigg-Galt all showing glimpses. 77 laps are ahead of us. Any one of these laps could bite. Be on your toes. This is going to be on edge from go to woe. Welcome to the Motorsport Australia Logitech G Pro Invitational Cup. Welcome everybody to a cool and cloudy Watkins Glen. This is going to be a memorable night ahead. To call the action, we have Lockie Mansell, Stephen Sandman Clark and Jake Blackhall. Gents, it seems like forever since we've been racing, but tonight promises to make that up real quick. How do you think this is going to end up?
Thanks, Cass. It has been a long time, 7 weeks to be precise, since the previous round of the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series at Spa, and there is a reason for that. Spa was round 3. Tonight at Watkins Glen is round 5. We were supposed to have round 4 at Road America, Sandman, but unfortunately due to some iRacing updates that were taking place, that wasn't able to happen, and round 4 has actually been postponed until the 23rd of August. But nevertheless, great to be back racing tonight at Watkins Glen.
Absolutely, yeah, a little bit inconvenient. Good evening, everyone, wherever you're watching around Australia or even around the world. But yeah, look, you know, iRacing service do really well with their updates, and unfortunately it does clash a little bit. So look, at the end of the day, they're doing everything they can to improve our service. So I think I'm pretty happy to take a little bit of a back seat for a week or so, just so we can get those updates and forever changing this platform. So, and here we are, Watkins Glen. I love this track. This really does put on for some great racing, doesn't it? Because it's such a short track, it's going to be really close action, I imagine.
I think it will be, and this is one of the tracks where I can actually speak from a bit of experience, because I competed in a round here as a wildcard entry in the Supercars E-Series back in 2021, and I think, not that I went particularly well by any stretch of the imagination, but at least I have actually driven around this circuit, and it's a very fast-flowing circuit. It's a circuit where you can drive well beyond the boundaries of the racetrack without getting an off-track penalty and losing your lap time, and it's a circuit where slipstreaming is going to be one of the key factors tonight.
Absolutely. This track is a little bit quirky in that, and you brought it up exactly there. There's some of these corners that used to have gravel traps or grass sections, but I guess in their wisdom, just for safety, they've put a little bit of a runoff area on a couple of those corners. And unfortunately, I think the teams in real life do utilise that part of the racetrack. So I think they probably shouldn't, but look, it is what it is. And you know, it's the same deal for these guys. You can see up the top right-hand corner, that's the section where they go right out wide and they use all that tarmac. So listen, if it's allowed, they're going to utilise it because they're racers, and they'll use every part of the racetrack they can.
Exactly right, and the bottom line is it does improve your lap time, because when you go out wide like that, it allows you to carry more corner speed, so the overall benefit or the overall lap time gain is quite significant by doing that. Now, off the top, before we talk too much about the racing, just a bit of housekeeping. So in the previous round at Spa, there was a quite controversial incident involving Jared Filsell and Brady Myers. We saw that during the race, Jared Filsell copped a post-race 15-second time penalty. He subsequently appealed that decision. There was a stewards hearing which involved some of the key stewards behind the scenes here for the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series, including Chief Steward Peter Baxter and Driving Standards Observer Thomas Randall. The outcome is that the appeal was overruled or rejected, so that meant that not only did the penalty stand, but Jared Filsell copped an additional 100 championship points penalty. And the reason that there are those penalty points for drivers who are unsuccessful with appeals is to discourage people from making frivolous appeals. But the stewards noted that while the appeal was not successful, the only reason for that is because by the letter of the law, Filsell was in the wrong, because he was not deemed to have had enough overlap at the turning point for the corner where he and Brady Myers collided. But upon reviewing the regulations, the DSO and the stewards reached the conclusion that the rule actually needed to be tweaked to make it a little bit more lenient for the overtaking car. So previously, if you were the car doing the overtaking, you needed to get up to the B pillar of the car that you were passing. That's now been adjusted so that as long as your headlights are past the rear wheel of the car that you're making the move on, you are deemed to have sufficient overlap. Because what we don't want is a situation where people are afraid to overtake, because then we'll get really boring processional races. So the irony here, it's a bit unfortunate for Jared Fuel-Cell, because if the incident had been adjudicated based on the updated rules, he wouldn't have been penalised, but it's just that under the circumstances at the time, he was deemed to be in the wrong.
It's never a job that anyone wants in world motorsport, is to be part of that judiciary series where you are responsible or implementing penalties in motorsport. It's tricky. We look at incidents from time to time, and everyone has a different opinion. So look, at the end of the day, Jared's put his protest forward. He wasn't successful, but I think he's the type of driver that he can sort of bounce back from this. We know the pace he's got. He's a series champion. So at the end of the day, he'd be frustrated that it probably didn't go his way. At the end, I guess he just puts it behind him now and just pushes on. Yes, he got that points penalty, but it's like you said, you just don't want everyone just appealing every single penalty that comes to hand. It's not a good job. I take my hat off to anyone who deals with that sort of stuff in world motorsport, let alone E-Series. It's never an easy job, and you're not always going to get it right, but at the end of the day, someone has to make a decision, and that's the way it's played out.
And we are fortunate enough in the Logitech G Pro E-Series that we do have some very experienced people behind the scenes making those decisions. So Thomas Randall, vastly experienced in real-life Australian and international motorsport. He's raced overseas in some of the top open-wheel categories, currently races full-time particular racing in the Repco Supercars Championship, and he's vastly experienced with sim racing as well. He actually went and consulted Craig Baird, who's the driving standards advisor for the Repco Supercars Championship, to get Beardo's advice on that incident between Fuel-Cell and Brady Myers. So Thomas Randall, he'll be watching all of the action tonight and adjudicating on incidents. And like I said, Peter Baxter, the chief steward as well, he's the one who hears all of those protests and appeals and makes sure that the correct decisions are ultimately reached. So we are very fortunate that we've got people of that calibre working away behind the scenes with this series.
Absolutely, and it's like, you go back to Formula One, Michael Massey, we don't need to delve into how that all played out, but it's never an easy job, and you're always going to upset someone. So, and that's pretty cool to hear that, Thomas Randall reached out to Beardo, because obviously, he's got a tough gig as well. And he puts his hand up. He says, sometimes I don't get it right, but we're all human. Look, at the end of the day, it's nice that he reached out to Beardo, and I guess they came to that decision. So, now we look forward to Watkins Glen. Let's put it all behind us and let's just get on with some race. And like I said, Jared's the type of driver and the calibre of driver that he's so fast that, yeah, a points penalty isn't great, but it's such an early part of the season. He's got the pace and the speed to come back and make up those points.
Exactly right. It's a bit like being the referee or an umpire, isn't it, in rugby league or cricket or AFL. When people don't talk about you, that's when you know you're doing a good job. So we are going to give those officials a shout out, because they are doing a good job behind the scenes. But anyway, moving on, let's talk about some of the racing that we've seen, because it's been a cracking season so far. We've had 3 rounds. It's kicked off at Stewarding back in March. Seems like quite a while ago now. Then we had round 2 at Phillip Island in April, which was a twin race event. A couple of different race winners out of that one. And then round 3, the most recent round, held at Spa. The upshot is that from the 3 rounds and the 4 races that we've had 4 different race winners. Madison Down took out the season opener at Sebring. At Phillip Island, Jake Burton and Jared Fuel-Cell got a race win apiece, and then at Spa it was James Scott who took the victory to move to the top of the points standings, but not by much. He's only 16 points ahead of Jake Burton. Madison Down sitting in position number 3, 44 points off the lead of the series, just 2 points ahead of Ethan Grigolt in 4th position. Dylan Rudd 5th, and then it's Brady Myers, the consistent Brenton Hobson, Andrew Gilliam, Rick Kuznetsov, and another consistent performer who's been a bit of a quiet achiever so far this season, Blake Warboys, snaking inside the top 10.
How good is that lineup? You know, you go through the list and see the championship order as it stands, and there's no disrespect to anyone that's in that championship order, but you probably wouldn't have picked it going into sort of round one, saying that, you know, by this time, this is who your championship leader is going to be in second, third, fourth, you know. So I think that's a credit to everyone that's involved. There's so many good drivers and teams, and this is really where it counts now because we're heading straight into quality.
Indeed we are, and a few big names languishing down the order as well. We've already talked about Jared Filsell. He's all the way down in 28th position in the standings. Jordan Ross has had a tough old start to the season as well. He's sitting back there in 33rd position. And yeah, there's a few drivers that have certainly got a bit of work to do. Josh Anderson, probably the other big name, who's way down the order in 25th position.
Oh my God, look at that traffic jam coming out of pit lane. Jared Filsell, he has booked it. He's already gone. I think the problem that he's going to have is, of course, coming across this slow traffic when he starts his hot lap. There you go. Look at the track map. You can see just whereabouts he is now. And everyone is still, there's still people coming out of pit lane. So this is going to be very awkward for Jared, and it's going to be tricky because there could be a good chance where he's going to start tripping over someone if they're not careful and looking in their mirrors.
Well, we talked about the importance of slipstreaming here at Watkins Glen, and what everybody is going to try and do is get them into the position to get a tow from the car ahead. But the danger there is that the amount of time that you can lose tripping over other people, it can more than nullify any sort of advantage that you gain from the tow. So by doing what Jared Filsell's doing and trying to get some clear track, could actually work out okay. But like you said there, Sandman, the problem could be that as he gets towards the end of this flying lap, he's going to get badly balked by those slow-moving cars.
I think what I can see that he wants to do is just get out and put a banker down. He knows he's got no trouble around him. Of course, he's going to come up on this traffic. When we look at that track map now, he comes up through the S's. So that most of the teams and the other drivers are now starting to in that second last corner of the lap. So he might be okay, but he's still going to be mindful of who's around him and who's in front of him. So I think his mindset is just quickly put that banker in and then worry about playing with the slipstream later on.
He might just be okay here as he negotiates his way around the outer loop. We are using the shorter cup layout of Watkins Glen, so it's a very, very fast lap. We'll be doing 77 laps in total tonight. There'll be a couple of compulsory pit stops in the race, but I know it takes about 67 or odd seconds to get through a lap. And Jared Filsell, well, he's going to be lucky here. He's going to get across to complete a flying lap without getting balked by any cars.
That's brilliant. Good job, Jared. That's it. He's just gone out, he's put out a banker, and now he just sort of thinks about how he's going to play with the rest of these sort of, what have we got, 13, 12 odd minutes to go. So, yeah, good. I was really worried. I'm sure people in his camp were probably a little bit worried too as far as coming across traffic, but it's worked out quite nicely for him.
Bad time, eh? 1 minute 7.4.
Yeah, he's not too far off what the guys were doing in practice, so that's good. And of course, you know, the track changes a little bit, and now, especially with all these cars on track, you know, that is going to change. So this will be a bit of an indication of how strong his lap was, because everyone's starting to complete their first lap.
There's essentially only 7 corners on this racetrack, given that we're using the short layout of it, but it's quite heavily cambered in some sections. Heading up here through turns 2 and 3 and 4, fully committed through that section of the racetrack, and then heading into the bus stop. That's quite a high-speed section as well, deceptively fast through there. You need to try and throw the car or flow the car through the bus stop and use a lot of the curbs on both entry and exit.
So as everyone's completed that first lap, if you're wondering where Jared slipped to, he's now in P11. So he only finds himself, what is it, just over a tenth and a half behind the leaders. So this is what, you know, these guys will start thinking about and working with that aero. And you touched on it, Lockie, that, you know, aero is important around here because there's a couple of those long straightaways where you can really get that advantage. And now everyone just dives straight back into pit lane, puts on a fresh set of Dunlops, and they'll go again.
Because it is such a fast circuit and there's so many areas where you are pretty much full throttle, the places where you can gain and lose time, where there's brake applications, are few and far between. And what that means is that the lap times are really, really close. There's only 0.14 of a second separating the top 10 after the first round of flying laps.
That's terrific, isn't it? And that's a credit to these drivers and everyone who's put in the time, and they've got their cars set up pretty well. And, you know, there'll be some people there that are happy with their run and some people that aren't. But it is a bit of a fine science too, isn't it? Just guesstimating how much gap you need to the car in front, because you want to be there to take full advantage of the slipstream, but you don't want to be too close where you get jeopardised by if they make a little mistake and they check up a little bit early, because you don't want to do that. So it is a bit of a fine art, isn't it, Lockie?
100% as people now come back out of the pits with a fresh set of tyres to go for another run. I reckon that given how fast the laps are here at Watkins Glen, there's probably going to be time for 3 flyers in this session, I reckon. Get in, change the tyres quickly, get back out and go for another flyer. I reckon we'll see 3 distinct runs taken by most of the drivers in this session. So at the moment it's James Scott fastest ahead of Jake Burton. The margin there 0.04 of a second. Dylan Rudd, really good job from him. He's had a great start to the season, currently sitting inside the top 5 in the points in the 9-5 Sim Sport team. He's third, then it's Brady Myers fourth. Robert Gibbs up there in position 5. That's a good early lap from him. Madison Downs 6th, Dylan O'Shea, Jordan Ross, Brad Rattley up in the top 10, and then Marcello Rivera rounding out the top 10 at the moment.
Have a look at this. You've got 3 and 4 wide in some parts of the racetrack, so they're all just trying to find that little bit of real estate, maybe look for a teammate. Obviously, there's some drivers out there that do have teammates and some that don't, but they'll work with people that are around them, because obviously it benefits both drivers too. So you can see now they're just trying to get that little bit of real estate, and they'll be starting their lap as they get through these next couple of turns.
2 drivers who need to try and improve. Ethan Grigolf has not banked a lap yet, so he needs to get a time on the board. Also, Andrew Gilliam down in 15th position, so he needs to try and improve and move up a few spots. Josh Anderson sitting in 21st position. And Kurt Stenberg, who always races better than he qualifies, back in 32nd, so he needs to try and find some time to get himself a better grid position for the race.
Sorry, there was someone had a massive moment just on the exit of turn number 1. The car stepped out sideways and it looked like it was going to be a bit of a tank slapper, but thankfully they held onto it. But that's never good, isn't it? Out of the first corner where you have that big tank slapper, that just ruins that lap straight away.
But turn number 1, it's another one of those corners where there's a very generous runoff area on the outside, but unlike some of the other corners on the racetrack, it's not really a section of the track where you want to use that runoff, because if you end up out there, it probably means you've gone in a bit too deep.
I'm still flabbergasted about how much real estate they use on the exit of that turn. We just saw Steady come through. So, but you're right. It's catch-22. It's like, you know, how much can you get away with, because you don't want to throw it away, especially that first turn. It's so critical to get a good start to that lap. And if you ruin it, and that's what Steady's done, he's just made a little mistake. He's like, you know what, I'm just going to head straight back to the lane and put on some Dunlops.
Time starting to come down, so James Scott maintains his spot at the top, but only just. In fact, James Scott and Jared Filsell have both done lap times that are separated by 4 thousandths of a second. Ethan Grigolf has got a time on the board now, moves up into position 3, and relegates Jake Burton and Dylan Rudd back to positions 4 and 5 respectively.
It's one thing I love about this racetrack, about being a spectator, never as a driver, but as a spectator, because the times are so incredibly close. It doesn't take much just to make that little bit of a whoopsie and give away some time, but then you think to yourself, oh, I'm only a 10th down, that's probably not too bad, but then you find yourself outside of the top 10 at some point. So it's tricky, but it's really good close race.
Yeah, the racing will be spectacular when we do go racing later on, because you'll have big packs of cars all running in conga lines and using the slipstream from one another. We'll talk a bit more about strategy once we get up to the race, but fuel saving is going to be a big factor tonight, because it's a track where such a high percentage of the lap is full throttle. You do use a fair bit of fuel here, so any fuel that you can save by sitting in the draft of the car in front could prove very beneficial in the form of shorter pit stops. As here we go, everybody's coming into the pits to bolt on a fresh set of tyres and go for what will most likely be their 3rd and final run in this qualifying session.
Now it's a little bit of cat and mouse. You can see there's a couple of drivers that have tyres, but they're not quite ready to lead the pit lane yet, because they don't want to be the one up the front. But in saying that, Brady Myers is he's pretty keen just to get on with his lap. So he's currently sitting in P7 at the moment. So I wonder if he thinks if he can just get that little bit of clear real estate, he can probably just make up that little bit of time. But I would have thought you'd be really keen to try and get a draft. But obviously they'll have some sort of understanding of how much of an advantage that is. And if he's just made that little bit of whoopsie, he may even know exactly where that was. And he probably feels confident enough. Though, as I say that, now he's waiting for the cars to catch up. So I imagine he'd probably hook up with his TTR teammates here and just see what they can do.
Looks like there's a couple of different strategies playing out here, so I can see that there's some drivers going quite slowly on this out lap, and there's some others who are gunning it a bit harder. So a few different approaches, and like you said there, Sandman, it's a bit of a team tactics situation here. So teammates, they'll all be in communication with one another and trying to cooperate to help one another out.
Looks like Brady's still got another 4 or 5 cars between him before his teammates make it, so I don't know that he's going to be able to pull it off here, but perhaps he's just happy to sort of be where he is and just see what he can do. But like you said, Lockie, it's probably going to be the last lap for these guys because we're slowly running out of time.
Indeed we are, so less than 4 minutes now remaining in this session, and this will surely be the start of the final flying laps in this qualifying session. So it's all going to come down to this to decide who will get pole position. It's your points leader, James Scott, on top at the moment by the barest of margins from his Synergy Sim Racing teammate, Jared Filsell. Ethan Grigolt for the Evolution Racing team sitting in 3rd position, and Jake Burton, the best of the Trans-Tasman racing drivers, in position number 4 at the moment. Let's see if anybody can improve and vault themselves up the order in the dying stage of this session.
Yeah, like Phil, so I'll be pretty happy with that bounce back. We touched on how he did that first lap, got the banker down, but to be so close, there's a couple of cars getting out of the way, so Jared looks like he's probably just out of step with these guys. He's probably going to let these ones go. Oh, closing up big time there.
That's a bit ugly. The problem here is that he's trying to stay off the racing line, but at some point he will have to turn back across, and in fact he's shortcut the bus stop completely just to try and stay out of the way of some of those other cars that were on flying laps, because there's more awkward moments here coming out of the outer loop. That's that section of the track that we've been talking about where the drivers go right out across the ripple strip, but the lap times have improved. Dylan Rudd moves up to D2. What a lap time from Dylan Rudd. And it's identical to the 1,000th of a second to James Scott. 107.338 for James Scott, 107.338 for Dylan Rudd, and 107.340 for Madison Down, 107.342 for Jared Filsell. We have got the top 4 cars separated by 0.004 of a second. Unbelievable.
How incredible is that? Just as I'd said, it was like down to P2 and then Rudd goes along. It's like, man, those times are incredible. But that's what Watkins Glen brings because of this track and the way this style of racing is. It's just incredible. A couple of guys now still probably going to finish their lap now, so it'll be interesting to see if anyone can touch that top 5.
Just to clarify as well, so if you do end up with a situation where 2 drivers do an identical lap time, the preference is given to the driver who set their time first, which in this case is James Scott. So at the moment, he has pole position by virtue of the fact that he punched out that lap time earlier than Dylan Rudd. But Dylan Rudd, the driver of that qualifying session for mine, because provisionally at least he's looking good for a front row start at the moment.
Yeah, and I just noticed there's a heap of cars that have managed to get back, put on a set of tyres, because obviously you've still got to the 14-minute mark, 59 seconds to start your lap. So as long as you can start your lap, you get to finish it. So that's what a lot of these teams have done. They've actually made the bolt back to the pit lane, and now they're trying to get round. So there's just under another minute to go where these drivers can actually start their last lap.
Exactly right. So these cars on screen now, headed up by Marcello Rivera in the Evolution Racing Team Commodore, they will get one more crack at it. So they've timed that to perfection to get in and out of the pits in time to get one more flying lap. So James Scott is not safe on pole position yet, because this conga line of cars has the chance to mount a late challenge.
I still can't believe those gaps between the top 5. That's just incredible stuff. That's just so good. And Yeah, it's not over yet. We can't even call it yet because we don't know what's going to happen with this last lap. Still another 15 seconds to go before someone can start their lap. Oh, someone's made hard contact to the Armco too out of that left-hander.
Yeah, just
right-hander, sorry.
Shot there. Yes, wow. So the checkered flag is out, so the drivers will get to complete the lap they're on. Looks like some of them have aborted their lap, so possibly made a mistake or seen, based on the information coming to them through iRacing, that they're too far down on their best lap, so they've decided not to bother completing it. Not sure that anybody's quite going to be on a lap fast enough to challenge for pole position. We'll wait for these final lap times to play out as the checkered flag waves on this session. Tom Freer moves up into the top 10 on his final lap, so he was able to improve. And Jared Filsell goes to the top just to make a mockery of what I was saying. Just when we thought the session was done and that James Scott had pole in the bag, Jared Filsell has pulled out a blinder on the final lap of the session and puts car number 1 to position number 1 to make it an all Synergy Sim Racing front row.
Well done, Jared Filsell. That was awesome. I reckon he got a little bit of a toe there, but it was just a brilliant lap, and he's opened up a decent-sized margin. And we say decent-sized margin.
That's huge.
Yeah, that's massive for what we've been talking about tonight, because the times have been incredibly close. But, mate, that was really good. Well done, Jared. He's celebrating. I think he enjoyed that one just that little bit.
Well, the pressure's on him at the moment, isn't it, after the dramas of the previous round at Spa. Also the DNF that he had in the opening round at Sebring, and also the 100-point penalty that he copped for that unsuccessful appeal. He really needs to be winning races to get himself back into title calculations. And the best way to do that is to be fast and to qualify up the pointy end.
Yeah, absolutely well done. Like you said, it's the best thing to do is just put it behind him and let his talking do it, play out on the racetrack, and that's what he's done. He's put it on pole position, a great lap, and mate, this should be an absolute cracker of a race. I can't wait.
So your top 10 qualifiers: Jared Filsell ahead of James Scott, back to Dylan Rudd, and then Madison Down in position number 4. Dylan O'Shea will line up out of grid position number 5, and then it is Ethan Grigolt in position 6, Jake Burton in 7th position, Brady Myers, Tom Freer and Josh Anderson rounding out the top 10. It's now time for our pre-race grid walk, where we can catch up with a few drivers and talk to them about the qualifying session and their expectations for the race. And we'll start off by having a chat to our pole sitter, Jared Filsell, who joins us down on the grid. Jared, you left it until the very dying stages of that qualifying session, but an absolute blinder lap there to snatch pole position at the checkered flag. Well done.
Yeah, cheers. Left it too late. Ideally, I would have liked to have done it a little bit earlier, but a bit climatic for you guys in the broadcast.
Did you have much of an advantage from any sort of slipstream during that final lap there?
Yeah, definitely. I just did a much better lap behind someone in that last run. Had too much understeer. I was probably too close to the cars beforehand. The first run I did, I just went out by myself, wanting to put a banker down, but that wasn't that great a lap, considering. But yeah, happy to get pole.
How are you expecting the race to play out tonight?
Like a chess match, to be honest. It's going to be interesting.
Do you want to elaborate on that a bit for us, Jared, and just explain how the tactics are going to play out?
Well, I don't want to be leading until the last lap. So, yeah, that's it's going to be interesting to see who's happy to lead and burn their fuel up. I definitely am not. So, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Well done on pole position. No secret that it's been a bit of a patchy start to the season for you, but the best way to get yourself back into title calculations is to be qualifying on pole position and winning races, so go well tonight.
Yep, thank you.
There he is, Jared Filsell. He'll start on pole position. Lining up alongside him on the front row of the grid is James Scott, and Sandman, it looks like you found him down there on the grid.
Absolutely, James. Well done. Nice and close between your teammate. I reckon you'd be pretty chuffed with that. Jared was talking about how he doesn't want to lead this race. I guess you might be in the same seat as well.
Yeah, I think most people, if you ask them that question, I think they'll probably all say the same thing. So it's probably going to be pretty exciting at the start. The times are crazy close. Like, I was just looking at the times all the way down to like P18 was still in the 0.4, so that's pretty ridiculous.
Was that the fear coming into Watkins Glen? Because obviously this type of racetrack does pretty much show that, you know, the times that are incredibly close throughout the field. Was that something you were cautious about, knowing that the times were going to be so close and coming into this round?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, if you're just the wrong side of the 10th, you can go down like 10, 15 spots. So I was obviously wary of that. And you can think to yourself, you did a pretty good lap. And just have the tiniest error and be way off. So I'm glad I can start somewhere near the front, and we'll see what we can do.
And before we let you go, series leader at this stage, how are you feeling that your championship run is running so far? Obviously it's early days, but you know, you're obviously in the best position too for the start of this championship.
Yeah, it's only, what is it, I think this is round 5, but technically only round 4, so
yep.
No, it's still a long way to go, so I'm not really thinking about that at all, really. Just if you go out there and do the best results you can, I know all that stuff will take care of itself. So I don't know, we'll just try and stay out of trouble, try and get a good result, and yeah, just play it by ear.
And have you spoken about the start with your teammate Jared Filsell? Obviously you guys side by side going into turn 1. Has there been any discussions about how you'll approach that?
Not yet. Probably after this we'll go have a quick chat about it, how we're going to go about it, but yeah, not yet. It's obviously good having your teammate up there with you. Makes it just the tiniest bit easier. And obviously having someone with Jared's experience as well, certainly a benefit.
Well, good luck for tonight, mate. Stay out of trouble, and hopefully we're talking to you at the end of the race.
Thanks, mate.
There you go, Lockie. It's the best way to start, isn't it, when you're up the front and you've got your teammate on the front row with you?
Indeed it is, Sandman, and interesting to hear the drivers there are already thinking about tactics for the run down into turn 1. Those two teammates for Synergy Sim Racing are going to be side by side heading down into the first corner. I've wandered a bit further back down the grid, down to position number 15, where I found Marcello Rivera in the number 21 Evolution Racing Team Commodore. Hey Marcello, how was that qualifying session for you?
Yeah, g'day guys. It was pretty intense, as we all expected, with the close times that you can all see there. But yeah, I'd say it could have gone better for me, but it also could have been worse. So I'll take where I am and just eyes forward for the race.
Heading into the first corner, in fact for the first lap, you're going to be right in the cut and thrust of the mid pack. How important is it just to make sure that you stay out of trouble and don't sustain any early damage?
Yeah, it's going to be very crucial to keep a clean race, avoid any carnage that may happen. And yeah, like you said, P15 right in the middle of a lot of drivers that'll be looking to make gains or to move forward from their qualifying. So I'm going to have to definitely keep checking the mirrors and have all alerts on to avoid any carnage up ahead.
You've got some very capable teammates around you. So Ethan Griggolt starting out of position 6. You've got Robert Gibbs out of position number 11 on the grid, and Matthew Bowler starting just a couple of spots ahead of you in position number 13. Team tactics, how closely are you going to work together during the race?
Yeah, normally we just play it out. You know, we all just do our own race and see how it all pans out. And as it all kind of evolves, we might then be a bit more tactical if we've got a 1-2 or a 2 drivers together and we want to see if we get a jump on some guys up ahead. So it all just depends on how the first few laps pan out and how the race is going.
Fair enough. Well, we'll let you go and get ready for the start of the race. Go well tonight, Marcello.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
There we go. And Sandman's wandered a bit further back down the grid, and he is going to catch up with Jack Boyd.
Yeah, Jack, mate, a little bit further back down the grid than anyone probably would have expected. But look, at the end of the day, you're on the grid, 77 laps. It's a long race. How are you going to play this out in the next couple of laps, especially these opening ones, because you've got to be so cautious with the amount of traffic around you?
Yeah, hey guys. Yeah, it's first lap's going to be make or break. I think. Yeah, definitely a bit lower than what I thought I had in me. P26, but yeah, the field's just so close. I think it's like 2.5 tenths between me and pole. So that's the way it goes. We'll see if we can get through turn 1 and the S's. That's going to be yeah, pretty chaotic trying to get 40 cars through there. But yeah, we'll see how we go.
Isn't it funny? It's the nature of this racetrack, isn't it? Because any other racetrack and you think, oh, you're about 2 tenths off, you go, yeah, I'd probably take that. But you wouldn't expect to be this far down the grid. So, yeah, that's a tricky one. But, you know, it's a long race. Yeah, you're going to be very cautious. I guess cautiously aggressive is probably what you'd probably go for the opening laps.
Yeah, we'll see. It's going to be hard, like 77 laps. It's a long way around here. Yeah, strategy, tyres and all that sort of stuff is going to play a big role as well. So first 2 or 3 laps, just get through, have a clean car, no damage, and yeah, try and work my way through.
All right, we'll let you go, Jack. We're almost ready for a green flag here. 77 laps, enjoy it, and hopefully we're talking to you at the end of the night.
No worries. Thanks, guys.
There you go, Jack. Lockie, 77 laps. This is, it sounds incredibly long, doesn't it? But we peel off these laps around here so quickly.
Yeah, it'll go by very, very quickly, and as a few of the drivers have alluded to, it will be a high-speed game of chess. Confirmation of your grid positions. There's your top 12. Jared Fieldcell ahead of James Scott, Dylan Rudd, Madison Down, back to Dylan O'Shea, Ethan Griggolt, Jake Burton, Brady Myers, Tom Freer and Josh Anderson rounding out the top 10, and then it's Robert Gibbs out of 11th position and Andrew Gilliam out of P12 for the Pursuit Sim Racing team.
I'm still sitting here and just can't believe what we saw in qualifying. Just so close. And this is really, I guess it's going to be Talladega-ish, isn't it? A little bit around this racetrack where everyone will just be utilising that slipstream. No one will want to lead and everyone will just want to try and save as much fuel as they can.
You have to go all the way back to position number 35 before you find anybody with a lap time that is more than half a second away from our pole sitter, Jared Fieldcell. He'll start out of position number 1. His teammate, James Scott, alongside him on the front row of the grid. In the previous round at Spa, we saw it was in the early laps where Fieldcell found himself in trouble. The collision with Brady Myers that ended in controversy and ended in a penalty. So Jared Fieldcell will be looking for a trouble-free, a contact-free race in these first few laps. It's round number 5 of the Logitech G Pro Invitational Supercars A-Series here at Watkins Glen. The race is underway and they're already fanning out, and what a start from a few rows back from Dylan Rudd. He has absolutely nailed the launch that goes through to take the lead on the opening lap.
Oh, look at him 3 wide too. There's contact. Oh, he's going to hold on to it. Who was that? One of the TTR cars. I don't know if he managed to keep it off the arm code. Madison Down. Looks like the car's fairly straight though, so he got away with that. Not what you want in the first couple of corners.
Definitely not, but what a save by Madison Down. He managed to gather it up. He managed to keep it out of the Armco, and he's only fallen back to position number 10. That could have been so much worse for our round 1 winner. Replay of the start in the bottom of the frame, and it was an excellent launch from Dylan Rudd. He absolutely nailed the reaction time as they head through the outer loop, turn number 7.
3 wide.
Final couple of corners, 8 and 9. You can see that they were, running 3 wide, even I think 4 wide in a few cases there on the run down into turn number 1. But it is Dylan Rudd, your race leader. James Scott has moved ahead of his teammate Jared Fieldcell. So our pole sitter has been relegated to 3rd position on the opening lap.
It's funny, we were just talking about these guys, how they just weren't really keen about leading. So, yeah, they probably didn't get the best of starts, but when they saw how strong Dylan Rudd was at the start, they were probably like, you know what, it's probably working into our wheelhouse a little bit because we're quite happy for him to lead and punch a hole in the air. They said that they were pretty much keen just to sort of sit there and run in the slipstream. So when you're in touch with the leaders like that, I don't think they're too worried at this stage.
Madison Down, that was an unbelievable save for him. I still cannot believe that he kept that car out of the Armco and only lost what amounted to 6 positions. It could have been so much worse. It could have actually been a pile-up. We have seen some bigger accidents there in the past where drivers have spun across the track in the early laps when the field has all been tightly bunched and it's created a multiple car carnage fest. Thankfully on this occasion we managed to avoid that, but you can see that even though Dylan Rudd was very fast on the opening lap, because he's got no slipstream, because he's got nobody punching a hole through the air in front, he will be very quickly caught by the cars behind. A replay of the start, they were fanning out on the run down into turn number 1. Dylan Rudd took the lead, but let's have a look at what happened to Madison Down. They're running 3 wide on the exit of turn number 1. Down was on the outside, and that was where the contact was. So it was Dylan O'Shea in the 9.5 Sim Sport Mustang who made contact with the rear of Madison Down, and that was an incredible bit of driving. Amazing car control from Down to keep that on the flat stuff.
That was a cool replay too, because you could see the wheel work, the amount of opposite lock he had to put in to get the car and then fire it back the other way and straighten it up. He would have just been thanking his lucky stars that he wasn't in the arm coat, because the last thing you want is damage, especially at the start of the race. So his heart rate would have been through the roof, but thankfully he could put that behind him, just gather his breath a little bit, and now he can sort of put eyes forward now.
I don't think there'll be any penalty for that. Obviously, it was car-to-car contact. Now, driving standards observer Thomas Rad will have a look at it because it was the first lap of the race and everybody was just sorting themselves out. I don't really think you could penalise anyone for that incident.
No, and I don't think Down would be thinking that either at that point. You know, everyone's just, like you said, they're all hustling for the start of the race. A little bit of 3 wide and everyone's got a little bit of give and take. So, yeah, it was just a little bit of a touch, and thankfully no one paid the price, so that's good.
Fastest lap of the race so far has been recorded by Aidan Briggold, who currently sits in position 5. With Dylan Rudd, your race leader at the moment, ahead of Scott, Gilsell, O'Shea, Briggold. We're looking out the back of his car at the moment at Brady Myers, who's just ahead of Jake Burton and Josh Anderson and Madison Down. So you've got Trans-Tasman cars running in positions 6, 7, 8 and 9, all line astern.
I don't know if it's because of my love of NASCAR, but I do love when we've got racetracks where these guys really have to sort of utilise the draft a little bit, because that really keeps them in the ball game. So I know there'll be a couple of drivers that will try and do the bolt and break away and try to break up those cars a little bit. And so, you know, but when it plays out like this and you can see like there's just a Congo line of cars and everyone's just trying to keep in touch because they know it's such a long race, but they know how crucial that little bit of draft is too.
So at the moment, from positions 1 down to 15, there's no more than 0.3 of a second separating any cars. The biggest gap on the track is actually the gap from 15th back to 16th position, which is Jake Maloney back to Job Stewart, who has just lost touch with, could we describe it as the peloton? Is that a term that you can use in car racing? It's probably more a cycling term, isn't it? But I feel like it's appropriate for this sort of race where you really do want to be in that main leading pack of cars.
I've noticed on that wide shot too, there's a car in pit lane, so I don't know what that was all about. Someone's fired off into the pit lane, but a little battle here. These guys trying side by side. You've got to hold your breath a little bit and give a little bit of give and take coming into the chicane. That's the last place you want to go side by side through with someone, because it's so easy just to make that little nose to tail contact and have your night go pear-shaped. But yeah, someone was in the lane, so hopefully that's not too much damage. That's a little bit way too early, obviously, for strategy, but nevertheless, we'll see how that plays out.
So that is Harrison Dengate, who's in the pits at the moment there.
Here's me mate Rehan. I love how he goes about his racing. He's got his driver cam there. You can see how focused he is, and he's really done a good job this series, because obviously he made his way through the qualifying series to take part in the Logitech G Pro Invitational, and he's having a really good run, and I reckon he's a talent of the future. I don't think it'll be too much longer before you see him up the front, really giving the curry to the rest of the teams up there.
He's been one of the stars, certainly in the qualifying series that we had to set the grid for the A-Series. He was one of the drivers who impressed us the most, and we saw when he was taking the fight right up to some far more experienced drivers. He sits 18th at the moment. He's one of the youngest, if not the youngest driver in the field, and he's doing a good job gaining experience on all different racetracks in these cars. Ethan Briggold tucked up behind Dylan O'Shea, and you get the feeling at the moment, Sandman, that we heard Jared Filsell at the top of the broadcast when we interviewed him on the grid talking about it being a game of chess. At the moment, unless you feel like you're losing a lot of time, you probably don't want to be taking many risks as far as overtaking manoeuvres go, because track position at this early stage of the race is not overly important. What is important is making sure you stay out of trouble, you don't sustain any damage, and more importantly, that you save fuel, because the more fuel that you can save at the moment, the shorter your pit stops will be, and therefore the more of an advantage you will have later in the race.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're just going to check out a little bit of a replay here. Oh, making a move up the inside. There's a TTR car on Marcelo. Oh, adored him. He's gone round. Oh, is he going to be able to keep it off? He did. He kept it off the Armco. So, yeah, that's going to keep the stewards happy. Oh, he just did to back it in there too. Hopefully not too much damage. But, yeah, that's a tricky part of the racetrack when you make a dive up the inside. But the stewards will have a quick look at that. What I was going to say is that with these guys, they just need to stay in touch. It's probably not going to be that too exciting, I think, in the first few laps, because obviously they've got 2 pit stops that they need to make throughout this race. They are saving fuel at this stage. They know the leaders aren't running away. So it's exactly like yourself and Phil Sell said, is that game of chess.
I think that was Richard Hampstead who made contact there with Marcello Rivera. Both those cars have come in for, Rivera's coming from Hampstead, still out on the circuit at the moment. This is tight here, side by side, coming out of turn number 2. Oh, that makes me nervous seeing cars side by side through there, but they managed to stay line astern. So that was Ethan Grigol. He just made the move through on Dylan O'Shea, and that was Jake Burton lining up alongside O'Shea. But the problem for Burton is that's actually compromised his exit speed, and he's going to lose the spot there, Jake Burton, as Brady Myers sweeps around the outside heading through the bus stop.
Yeah, it's always handy when you've got a couple of teammates around to help you with that sort of situation too, because, you know, when you get left out to dry, sometimes that's never good. But when you've got a couple of teammates that you can chat with and say, all right, you know, let's try and work together, that's always handy. But geez, look how wide they are for that final, that other turn up the top there. That's incredible just to see how wide they get. I know in iRacing you'll see where drivers will get an off track, that part of the racetrack, and down here at turn number 1, you have to really, really go wide, because, you know, at the end of the day, they are allowed to run off the racetrack, so they don't automatically get that cut track penalty.
Sorry, my apologies. That was actually Burton moving ahead of Myers. Andrew Gilliam moving up into the top 10 as well, relieving Robert Gibbs of position 10. It's starting to get a bit feisty here as well. These drivers making a bit of a mockery about what I was saying before about not wanting to make overly enthusiastic overtaking manoeuvres. Here's Matthew Bowler back in 16th position up behind Job Stewart, who currently leads the way in the real-life Dunlop Super 2 series. Super 3 series, I beg your pardon. You can see how much of the curves they use there through the bus stop as well, Sandman. It looks, on the track map, it looks like it would be quite a slow section of racetrack, but because of the amount of curb that you can use, you can effectively straight line both the entry and the exit, which means you can carry a lot of speed both on the way into and on the way out of the bus stop.
Yeah, absolutely. You took the words out of my mouth. That's exactly what they do. Just try and straight light that as much as they can. You look at it, you think, oh my goodness, like, you know, how you look at that part of the racetrack and think, how can these guys get through there so quick? But it's because they can open up and make those corners just that little bit wider, where they try and straight line those big curves.
So Jake Burton now up ahead of Dylan O'Shea. So O'Shea, after a strong start, has dropped a couple of spots in the last couple of laps. We ride on board with Blake Warboys, who's down in 23rd position at the moment. Like I said, he's steadily accumulated points so far this season just by staying out of trouble. Oh no, we've got a big stunt on the way into the bus stop. My goodness gracious me, a couple of cars have tangled at quite high speed on the way into that corner. Jordan Ross has been involved in that incident, and Tom Freer caught up in it as well.
It was a TTR car that had damage down the left side of it too, so I didn't see who that was. But man, I think that just would have been someone making
Doug Maloney's car, perhaps.
Yeah, I wonder if it was making a move up the inside, or they just misjudged the braking zone and there could have been a bit of nose to tail contact. Not sure, but man, that there's a couple of cars that have burnt up from that.
So it's the approach to the bus stop. So back in the oh no.
There's a lot of weaving going on back there. I don't know if they were trying to break the draft or what they were trying to do, but yeah, that got ugly very quick, didn't it?
I think somebody moved across in the braking zone there. It was all a bit awkward because they were running 2 and 3 wide on the way into that corner. Here's another look at it from the overhead shot.
Oh, 3 wide. Oh, gave him a tap under brakes. Oh, so all 3 of those cars were innocent bystanders. Oh man, that was just a concertina effect there, unfortunately.
So that was one of the Pursuit sim racing cars that may have been Job Stewart, in fact, who was the catalyst for that incident. That'll be something for the officials to look at. We're hearing that Marcello Rivera, 2-minute optional repairs, just hearing from the Evolution Racing team manager Brenton O'Brien. His car is compromised, so they've taken an aggressive strategy of pitting early to get him out of the...
Oh, big dive up the inside. Made it through. Is that O'Shea? Oh, they're going to go side by side through here. This is where you've got to hold your breath. A little bit of give and take. It's easy to get up over that curve. Oh, cut across the nose. That could have been disastrous. I was going to say, when you get up on that curve, sometimes these cars move about and you don't want to move across the nose across like that. But, man, that could have been massively, massively ugly.
And that was costly for Brady Myers as well, because it caused him to lose momentum heading up the hill. And as a result of that, he's actually dropped a position to Madison Down. So in trying to make up a spot, Brady Myers has actually lost one to his Trans-Tasman teammate out of that. So just to come back to the point that I was making about Marcello Rivera, because he got a bit of damage early in the race, the car's a bit wounded at the moment. So what they've decided to do is get him out of the traffic with an early pit stop. It's quite an aggressive strategy, but they feel like that by getting him some clear track, it will pay them some dividends a bit later on. He's back in 40th position at the moment. There will be a couple of compulsory pit stops that the drivers will have to do in this race, but for your first pit stop, the optimum time won't be until about lap 25 or 26 if you want to split the race up into 3 even segments.
And don't rule out the possibility of a safety car. You can see just how narrow it is up through where all that Armco is through the S's. You know, it's so easy where a couple of cars could get involved in that, and that could bring out a safety car. So, you know, it's not unusual to see a safety car out here, but you just never know how it could play out. But, you know, it's good that some people are rolling the dice too. They're not just playing the slipstream game and just seeing how this race pans out, because although they are sort of towing each other along, they're not really lapping in massively quick times. So maybe someone just feels that if they get out of strategy, get some clear air, they can push on and maybe be a little bit quicker than what this pack is.
Yeah, there's definitely a few different strategic options that could play out, but because of the value of being in the slipstream, wouldn't be surprised if we see a lot of people go with
move for the lead.
Here we go, yes. So James Scott has decided that he's had enough of sitting behind Dylan Rudd. He goes through and yeah, it was that, yes, Burton up the inside of Ethan Rigault, who returns serve on the exit. Rigault loses a bit of momentum and comes under some pressure from Dylan O'Shea and the recovering Madison Down. Luke Rosella has copped a 5-second time penalty for contact with Freeman on lap number 6. That's Thomas Freeman at the first corner.
Jared.
Another change in position, so Jared Filsell up the inside. So our early race leader, Dylan Rudd, has been shuffled back to third, and I get the feeling that these two Synergy Sim Racing teammates have decided that it's time to go. Look at that, they're both putting their head down and they're both trying to open up some breathing space on the pack of cars that are now bottled up behind Dylan Rudd. So Rudd becoming a bit of a cork in the bottle here.
We touched on that just before, isn't it? Where we said that there was other drivers that felt probably the train wasn't going as fast as they would have liked. So that's probably what they've thought about. They've thought about the teams that have made that dash and made that run where they've got no traffic in front of them. So they probably feel they've needed to lift the pace. You can see another TTR car just fired off into the pit lane there. So that's Maloney. But they probably feel that they know that these guys are doing the bolt. So that's what they want to do now.
It's a bit of a tricky pit entry here at Watkins Glen as well, and you can gain or lose a lot of time through the pit entry process. And we saw it looks like a bit of an awkward pit entry there for Jake Maloney. It looks like he had to cut across into pit entry. Oh, and that's why he copped a hit from behind as he was turning into the pits. And that was happening.
There we go.
Behind as well, involving Dylan O'Shea. So that was why O'Shea suddenly slipped back to position 15. It was because he copped serve on the way into turn 1.
It's funny, I was just looking for his name and I was just like, I couldn't see him, and I wanted to see how many spots he'd lost. But so a little bit of contact there, and I know that's Yeah, I think the stewards are going to be pretty interested in that one, quite possibly. So I'll leave that to them. But yeah, he'd be kicking himself just with that little bit of contact, and hopefully he hasn't got too much damage that he can push on a little bit.
Dylan Rudd's lost another couple of spots as well, so both Jake Burton and Ethan Grigolt have been able to get past Dylan Rudd. As we see, Adam Grigg defending on the run into turn number 1 and copping a tap on the exit from behind. He's a bit further back in the pack at the moment, back in 22nd position with Jack Boyd, who we spoke to on the grid before the start of this race, and also Hayden Veld behind him.
Isn't it funny how this race has changed just over the last couple of laps, where Scott and Phil were like, you know what, we've had enough running down in second and third, we want to run and start to get to the lead. And as soon as they pick the pace up, it's gone a little bit crazy. There's a couple of cars that have had contact and they've been making these dive moves, and the field is now starting to stretch out a little bit, and this is not what we saw in the opening laps.
Well, as soon as Phil Sell and Scott got ahead of Dylan Rudd, the likes of Burton, Grigolt, Madison down, they've all seen that, and they've all said to themselves, well, we can't afford to let them get too far ahead. We need to make sure we get past Dylan Rudd as well, and all of a sudden that's why we've started to see a few more aggressive manoeuvres. But it's Shane Scott leading the way by 0.25 of a second from his teammate Jared Filsell. Synergy Sim Racing cars running in positions 1 and 2 at the moment. Jake Burton third with Ethan Grigolt fourth. Dylan Rudd still maintaining a position in the top 5 at the moment, but our early race leader has been shuffled back since the start of this race. So we're on lap number 17 of 77 here at Watkins Glen. You're watching round number 5 of the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series, and you're watching it on the Race Stars Network, on all of the Logitech G Pro Invitational social media channels, and also a very good evening to our viewers tuning in on the Motorsport Australia social channels tonight as well.
We saw shots of Burton there, who's in third place. It's good to see his change of form. Like, he was strong at the start of last season, then it sort of fell away a little bit. He's now gone back to his old team at Trans-Tasman Racing, and it's like he's really gelled in well with these guys. He's got good pace, and here he is in P3. So it's actually quite comforting to see just how much more competitive he is this year compared to what he went through last year.
He is looking comfortable, and he's very well placed in the championship as well. Very, very close to James Scott in the point standings after the first 3 rounds. And sitting in a good spot at the moment, position number 3. He just needs to make sure that he keeps those 2 race leaders in sight. There's Brady Myers. Currently sits in position number 7. Now, what will these Synergy Sim Racing teammates do? Will Phil Sell try and overtake Scott, or is he content to stay in behind James Scott at the moment? Another penalty coming up on our board there. Sebastian Vardell copping a time penalty for contact a few laps ago. And in answer to the question, there we go. The 2 cars, they've swapped positions, and I reckon James Scott made it easy there. It looks like he pulled off the racing line just to allow Jared Phil Sell to get through.
Absolutely. It feels like a little bit of the slingshot effect. It's like, you know, if the guy behind you starts getting a run, you just sort of breathe the throttle a little bit, let him go, and then you do vice versa. So you may find that Jared will push for a little bit, and if Scott gets that little bit of a run, he might do the same, just breathe the throttle a little bit. But it could be the fact that he probably just felt that Jared was that little bit faster, so it was beneficial for him just to try and see if they can pull away a little bit, because Burton has closed that gap now. It's down to 0.7 of a second. So I think it was out to 1.2 there at one stage when all this silliness started happening. So they know that everyone behind them is starting to pull up again, and maybe they just want to see if they can open that margin with Phil Sell leading.
Just starting to settle down into a bit of a rhythm at the moment. There's still a long, long way to go in this race. 58 laps still remaining on the board, and 2 pit stops still to come for the majority of the drivers in the field. The best, or the highest placed driver that's done a pit stop at the moment is going to be Jake Maloney, and he's down in 34th position at this stage.
Of course, the pit stop rule in effect is here, where they only need to get the car up on jack stands, but no one's really going to brave it without taking no tyres around here. So there's still going to be a fair bit of strategy to play out as far as where they want to make their pit stops and how they go about looking after their car. But I think one of the things they want to do, you can see one of the cars just peeled into pit lane there, a little bit of damage to that car too, is everyone will be keen to keep their car straight too. So it looks like Stewart's in the lane and Ross too. Ross, look at that damage that he's got to the left side. So Stewart served his drive-through penalty after contact with Jordan Ross, so you can see that's just happened right now. So he's put that behind him, and the good thing is it's only lap 20 of 77. So again, a safety car, and it can put him right back in the thick of it.
So that drive-through penalty for Job Stewart, that was obviously for that accident that happened on the approach to the bus stop a number of laps ago now. But yes, the driving standards observer Thomas Randall has had a look at that one, decided that Job Stewart was at fault, and he's had to take it through the pit lane as a result. Here is Brenton Hobson, well renowned for his consistency, Brenton Hobson, and once again he's demonstrating it this season, currently sitting 7th in the point standings coming into this round. So this is the incident for which Job Stewart was penalised, and this is on board with him. And yes, there was the contact, quite clear nose-to-tail contact, and the thing that will have upset the officials is the fact that that had consequences for multiple cars.
Yeah, you feel for the other guys that they were just innocent bystanders. Of course, when a car gets sideways and they're all grouped up like that, they were just, unfortunately, they copped a bit of damage from that. So the stewards have seen fittingly that there was a penalty involved, and they'll all push on now.
It's really tightened up in this lead pack, isn't it? For a while there, it looks like the two Synergy Sim Racing teammates at the front were going to break free, but the likes of Jake Burton, Ethan Grigolton, and even Dylan Rudd have had other ideas. Dylan Rudd, we saw that he lost a couple of positions, but he seems to have got his rhythm back, and right now he's circulating quickly enough to stay well within striking distance of the lead pack. Here we go. That's on here. Rehan Lenage, the young gun, Sean McNamara. They're going to go side by side through turn number 9, the final corner, and McNamara gets rubbed right up against the Armco. It'll be a door-to-door drag race down the straight and a braking duel into turn number 1. Leonage gets his elbows out and says, no, that position's my one. But the problem is he's running a little wide there on the exit. And that means that he's going to be vulnerable to attack from the cars behind.
It's always tricky there when you...
in that contest as well.
Sorry to cut over you there, mate. But yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? That part, you try to get up under brakes, and then the guy behind is trying to sort of turn in underneath, and yeah, it didn't quite pay off there. A little bit of contact. I don't know that too much will come from it, but yeah, it's just hard when they start tripping over themselves a little bit.
The big beneficiary of all of that was Brenton Hobson, a bit of experience coming to the fore for Hobbo there, because he was able to place the car ideally to make sure that he was able to capitalise on that drawdown that Leonage was doing on the run down into turn number 1 with McNamara.
So I think these guys are getting a little bit racy up front because they know that they're probably not too far away from pit stops. So they've probably been at a point where they've been looking after their cars and their tyres somewhat, and they figure, well, you know what, if we have to pit soon, let's use up what we've got, because we know that we're not too far away from pit stops. We don't exactly know when these guys are thinking about pit stops yet, but, you know, I think they're at a point now where you can see they're just starting to stretch out a little bit. Burton's now got that gap down to about 5 tenths now. So he just keeps closing that margin a little bit. I think he's pretty happy with the car from the outside. That's what it looks like anyway, and he's just looking to see what Phil Sell and Scott are going to do, and they'll all start thinking about their strategy when it comes time to hit pit lane.
You're probably still maybe 2 or 3 laps away from what would be the optimum time to pit. That's assuming that you want to split the race up into 3 roughly equal segments. But what is tyre degradation like here at Watkins Glen, Sandman?
Well, I was going to throw that question to you because you were probably one of the most recent guys to do some laps between you and me.
Enough to wear out my tyres.
I think I'd be pretty much the same. But, you know, these guys, obviously, they try to look after them for as long as they can because, you know, we touched on the possibility of safety cars. You just never know how these races play out. So I think they do get to a point where they look after their tyres, but when they know that they're not too far away from a pit stop, they'll just use it up because they know they don't have to worry about it for much longer.
The main reason I'm interested in the tyre degradation is because some of those drivers that have stopped a bit earlier may get a bit of an undercut advantage, but equally we could see somebody adopt a strategy where you run a bit longer in your first 2 stints and then you have fresh tyres at the end, which will give you an advantage if we were to get a late safety car.
It's a tricky game, the old strategic one, isn't it? Because so many things can play out and so many things can go against you when you think you've got the ideal strategy. So whether it be, you know, a safety car, or whether it be a little bit of contact from someone, or a lap car gets in the way and sort of balks you for a little while. So, but no doubt they'll all sort of have some sort of game plan, and they'll be thinking about how that can change over the next few laps.
Riding on board with Brad Rattu in one of the 9.5 SimSport entries. Under a bit of pressure from Dylan O'Shea. We saw that he had some contact before earlier in the race. He dropped some spots as Rattu whacks the wall on the exit of turn 9, and that's going to cost him exit speed and ultimately top end speed down the main straight away, to use the American terminology, and therefore Dylan O'Shea gets up the inside. Rattu might lose a couple more spots here as well. He'll go side by side with Matthew Bowler in the Evolution Racing Team car.
Oh, a little wiggle. See that?
Against the wall.
Yeah, he had just a little wiggle as he turned in, and that just, where that little bit of correction just put him out to the wall and just rubbed the wall.
He managed to hold off or fend off the attack from Matthew Bowler there. As we've got this tight battle continuing here. This has been going on for a few laps now. Rehan Leonard, Richard Hampstead, Jack Boyd in there as well, and Hayden Veld. The cut and thrust of the mid-pack in the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series.
We say it all the time, it doesn't matter where you are, whether you're first or last, there's always good battles up and down the racetrack, and we just kick ourselves that we just don't have enough cameras sometimes at the point, because there's so much action happening around, and until you're in the thick of it, you don't really realise just how good the racing is. You know, sometimes we're not fortunate enough to catch all the action, but we do the best we can. Oh, look at him, Rian's just trying to cover his line, he's got to be careful. Hampstead's on the outside, he's gone for the late break, the car's got sideways, he's run wide, but Rehan was just covering his line to the inside, and Hampstead tried to go around the outside, couldn't get it done.
Yeah, that was a little bit naughty from Rehan Lanhage there, because I think he moved in the braking zone at turn number 1 with Hampstead on the outside. Now it's going to be Jack Boyd's turn to line up for an attack on Lanhage. They're going to go side by side on the run up into the bus stop. It'll be a braking duel. And Jack Boyd, does he pull this one off? Yes, he does. Nicely done, Jack Boyd. He was on the outside there heading into the bus stop, but manages to get the job done.
I think the thing that's hurting Rehan, you can see on that right front, he's got a bit of damage. So you can see there's Hampstead. He's all over the back of him, a little bit of a contact. He's jumped on the brakes, out-braked himself, hasn't been able to pull the car up. But thankfully, he's been able to keep going. He's dropped a couple of spots, but I think that's what's hurting Rehan, is that he's just got that damage to the right front, and that's just hurting him with the straight line speed.
Yeah, and that was, like I said, it was a bit naughty because he changed his line twice. On the straight, you're only supposed to have one change of line, so he moved across to the inside to try and defend his position on the run into turn number 1, but then it was the second movement back across towards the outside in the braking zone that was pushing the boundaries of defensive driving.
Let's look at that track temperature too, 31 degrees that these guys are dealing with at the moment. So
actually come up a bit. It was cooler than that earlier in the race, and the ambient temperature is still only 18, so relatively cool air temperature, but with the UV on the circuit, the track temperature has increased somewhat since the race got underway.
Loving these cars. They're just all line astern here at the moment, just waiting to see who blinks as far as who's going to make that dive into pit lane, which is just on the right-hand side there. It's a tricky part too to dive into pit lane when everyone's nose to tail like that, because you really have to sort of check up and dart hard right, and we've seen on many occasions with different series in this iRacing service that it's easy to get caught up in a little bit of a nose to tail action when you're trying to dive into pit lane. It's important to let the guys know behind you that you are actually going to be checking up.
This turned into quite a long first stint for our front runners, because we're now on lap number 27, so if you pit on lap 27, and you go another 27 laps, that'll take you to lap number 54, and then it's only a 23 lap run to get home, to get to the end of the race on lap number 77. So it looks like we're going to see potentially a couple of quite long first stints and then a shorter final stint. So everybody's working towards having that shortest fuel stop that they can have at the end.
Love and Visor Cam, we're on board with Madison down. You can just see the wheel work that he's putting in. And I noticed down the back straight too, bouncing off the rev limiter. So he's really got good traction now that last corner. He's utilising that little bit of draft that he's got. And he's just staying in touch for the moment and just waiting to see how this all plays out. Just listen to the way he drives. It really gives you an understanding, especially up through these S's, about what they have to deal with and how they have to position their car to get through that back chicane as fast as they do. It's like we were touching on before. They try and straight line it the best they can, but man, it's heart and mouth sometimes when you're bouncing off those curves.
So at this point, the top 20 cars in the race all get to pit. Jack Boyd has actually just come in as well. And so the highest placed car who have done a pit stop is Luke Rosella. He sits in position number 21 at the moment. Noticed as well that Sebastian Flock, who's down in 31st position, has punched out the fastest lap of the race overall at 1 minute 7.8. So getting onto some fresh tyres in that pit stop, he's got some pretty good speed at the moment.
You see where our leaders are too, that they're not too far away from coming across a little bit of traffic too, just because the pace that they've got on board and the fact that they haven't made their pit stop yet. So I guess that's something to start to think about, because they obviously don't want to get caught up too much in as far as what everyone else is doing, because they're on two different game plans.
Yeah, well, that's a good point too, because it is such a short lap here. If you're 20 or 30 seconds behind the race leader when you come in to take the pit stop, you'll be that far away from going a lap down. I'm sure that if we get to a stage where the leaders are going to start being delayed by lap traffic, that will see them come on in to avoid that potential delay.
Absolutely, and that's the beauty about some of these teams having team managers and that throughout their team. They'll be looking, they'll have spotters that'll be checking to see where the action is on track and how far away. They'll know that they've got that interval that they're closing up on lap traffic. And it's like you said, you don't want to give up too much when you start to catch up on those back markers. Although they are on fresher tyres, sometimes they end up tripping over themselves, and it's so easy to get caught up in an incident. And that's the last thing that these guys need, because so far, for the leaders, their race is playing out perfectly for them.
So at the moment, the top 10 cars separated by less than 3 seconds. So the freight train has become elongated once again. The Evolution Racing Team Mustang, the last of the cars in that freight train at the moment.
Look at that map. That track map shows you exactly what these guys have to deal with. They'll be looking forward and they can see that they've got those cars that they're slowly starting to catch up on. And that's when they'll be starting to crunch the numbers about thinking about, is it time to pit and get out of this mess?
Yeah, I reckon pit stop's not going to be too far away. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see all of these cars coming in pretty much at the same time. Jared Gilsell, around the back part of the circuit, he's really strong. It seems to be from the bus stop through to the outer loop. He's able to pull a car length or two ahead of James Scott, but it's when we get into the higher speed section of the circuit where the others are able to reel him back in with the advantage of the slipstream.
Fascinated each time they come round to the start-finish line, whether they're going to dial off and fire straight into pit lane, but they're all still staying nose to tail somewhat, just waiting to see who blinks first. Obviously, they've all got some sort of idea of when they want to pit, but they will be keeping note, especially what the front runners are doing, because they want to keep in touch with that draft.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if all of these 10 drivers are on what we will sometimes describe as a reactive strategy, otherwise known as the monkey see, monkey do strategy. Basically, you watch what your rivals do and you copy exactly what they do.
Yeah, not too far for Jared now. He'd be looking forward. He can see those cars not too far off in the distance now, so there's not that much of a gap. You can see just in shot. So now we see, do they make that dart off into pit lane, or do they keep pushing on? They're going again.
They're going for now. The thing is, those cars that are up the road, they're not actually lapping that much slower than our race leaders at the moment, so it still might be another 2 or 3 laps before they catch up to the leaders.
this racetrack. It's very unique, isn't it, as far as this racing style that these guys have got to deal with, because we've touched on how the draft plays part, and it really brings and tows everyone along. So, and I just love that some people will roll the dice and try out different strategies and think about, possibly making an earlier stop to go long and get out of traffic and roll the dice on a safety car. You just never know how some of these are going to play out. But I love that everyone just doesn't do the exact same thing.
Surely pit stops are going to happen very soon, because these drivers, they will see that lap traffic ahead of them. Do they come in this time? No, they're going to go again.
It's a bit like you said, they're not really catching them, a second a lap. I guess, they are sort of pulling a little bit. Oh, here we go.
Burton. The inside, Jake Burton on James Scott. They'll go side by side into turn number 1. James Scott getting forced right out across that exit curve. They'll still be side by side heading up the hill. James Scott wants to fight this, but Jake Burton's going to be well positioned. Go door to door on the run up towards the bus stop. And all this has worked to the advantage of Jared Vilsell. He's not able to skip up the road by more than a second. Burton finally gets the job done on the run into the bus stop.
Well, so Burton looking racy there, and I was wondering there for a second whether Greg Galt was going to try and follow him through, but he probably just didn't quite get close enough. But as I say, that is right there. So they all took a moment. They pounced. I was waiting for Scott or Burton just to roll out of it through those S's and just give up that I guess that chance and the opportunity of possibly having contact. But they were fairly racy. They gave each other plenty of room, and really good to see.
And Jared Vilsell, I thought he might have come in that time, having extended a buffer over his rivals. I would have thought that might have been an ideal time to dive in, but no, he has stayed out again. So at this stage, it's the top 14 cars that are still yet to come down pit lane for their first pit stop. Luke Rosell in the highest placed car that has stopped ahead of Jake Maloney, Thomas Freeman, Dylan O'Shea. But now you would have to say that Synergy Sim Racing, any tactical advantage that they had by having their cars running in positions 1 and 2, they've now lost, because they've now been split by the Trans-Tasman car of Jake Burton. So any games that Phil Sell and Scott might have been playing with the rest of the field, they've now lost the opportunity to do that, and that was a mistake, wasn't it?
Yeah.
By James Scott heading out of the bus stop, so he's lost some more ground to both Phil Sell and to Burton, and that's just concertinaed the field up behind.
Yeah, he just missed his turn. Yeah, just missed it. Understeered there and just missed that apex, and that hurt him a little bit. Thankfully, he didn't lose too much, but his car's probably just starting to go away from it a little bit. Probably not feeling the best, and then probably maybe kicking himself. Oh, and that was a good goal. Greg Galt's fired off into the pit lane. So good on him. He's rolled the dice. He's got out of that draft, and he's gone, you know what? I'm just going to go put on a fresh set of boots. And I think everyone that now have seen that sees that Greg Galt's gone into the pit lane, they'll probably fire in the next lap or so.
Just a couple of other drivers down there as well. Sebastian Varndell and Damien Johnston. Sebastian Varndell's been in the pits for over 6 minutes, so his night is done, and Damien Johnston's been in there for almost 25 minutes. So both of those drivers, you would have to say, are retirements from the race tonight.
Yep, there's his car. That's heartbreaking. It's never good when you retire early from these races and you're in there for such a long time trying to fix whatever damage he's got. But yep, unfortunately it's curtains. But I wonder now, is Phil Sell going to get, because he's got a 1 second margin now over to Burton, so that would really sort of work in his favour if he decided to dart off into pit lane. And of course they need to keep the mindset now that Greg Galt will come out now with a fresh set of boots and he'll have pace on board. And he's staying out.
Phil Sell's going to stay out again. Surely he's going to have to come in very soon, because he's starting to catch up to those back markers. Yes, comes Dylan Rudd.
This will give you an indication when Rudd comes out. Oh, dive up the inside there. Wow. Pulled that off, but it didn't quite work out. He's run wide, and Down's been able to get him up the inside. But that was a big move. What I was going to say is it'll be interesting to see with the pit stops now, that 1 lap difference of tyres with Greg Galt, just to see if that pays out when Rudd is in the pit lane. So it'll be interesting to see how far separated those two are.
Okay, so a penalty drive-through for Kurt Stenberg, and that's for contact with Marcello Rivera. So another drive-through penalty has been imposed. Kurt Stenberg a bit further down the order, sitting in position 31 at the moment. So here is Jared Filsell. He's now in amongst lapped traffic, so surely he's going to have to pit because he's now going to start to get into a situation where he'll be losing time. No, he's going to stay out again.
He's obviously fairly comfortable, isn't he?
Unless he thinks that there's actually times being gained by the slipstream advantage. Oh!
That's not what he needs. That's the last thing he needs to be getting caught up in. If someone's, got fresher tyres and they're going to make a dive up the inside, it doesn't take much for whoever that is to make a little whoopsie and get Jared involved in it. That's the last thing he needs. So he's got to be very careful now because these guys around him have got those tyres and he just needs to make sure that he doesn't get caught up in some silliness that could ruin his night.
You're 100% right there. It's not just the speed that he's losing, Sandman, but it's also now becoming a risk mitigation factor. When you're in amongst this lapped traffic, the probability of getting caught up in an accident and putting you out of the race altogether, it becomes that much higher. Here is Richard Hampstead. He's back up the inside of Jared Filsell, and I reckon they might have had a bit of contact because there was clearly damage to the left rear of Jared Filsell's car. Has he had enough Jared Filsell? Does he come in this time? Yes.
Yeah, ideally.
He's lost time to Jake Burton there as well.
So now we see what sort of effect that's had with Greg Galt, because obviously now this is his second lap on those fresher tyres. So, and he was right in the mix of a Greg Galt. There wasn't much between them. So these guys have got a long pit lane to deal with, and you can see Greg Galt now coming into that back chicane. It'll be interesting to see where they come out around him. I would imagine that if he doesn't get held up too much here, he could be in front of these guys.
Yeah, but I think, again, look, Ethan Grigolt's being held up as well, so he's come out behind Dylan Rudd. Some of those cars that stopped earlier are going to come out with some really good track position here, so the order of the race is going to get shuffled up quite significantly after this first round of pit stops, based on the fact that Ethan Grigolt, who was right in the lead pack, is not even in the top 5 of the cars that have already stopped. So there's Luke Rosella. He's the first driver to have taken a compulsory pit stop. He's got the track all to himself. He's going to float to the top of the leaderboard here.
Oh, what's happened to Phil Sell? He's not come out. Burton down. Everyone's jumped him. What? These guys are going long. So they've done a really long stop there, both cars, where the rest of the other guys have already, they're sort of down the back straight, sort of heading towards the back chicane.
That's a massively long stop. That's put them well back in the pack though. Jared Filsell's come out in 29th and James Scott in 30th position. 44.4 seconds the pit stop time for Filsell and 43.7 seconds for James Scott. I wonder if they've done... Oh, we've had an
crash
there. Oh, Luke Mitchison just managing to get around that one, but it's Jordan Ross who's in the fence. He has been in the wars tonight, Jordan Ross.
Oh, he's been into the back of the TTR.
Bang into the Armco.
Oh, I don't know what that was all about. You don't need nose-to-tail contact through there.
Both Jordan Ross and Richard Hampstead have been belted from pillar to post so far this evening. So I'm just thinking about doing some number crunching here. I wonder, like, obviously you do have to do 2 compulsory pit stops, but I wonder if those two the two Synergy Sim Racing cars of Phil Sell and Scott can come in for their final pit stop, up on the jacks, down, go.
That's right.
Very quick stop. I reckon that's probably what they're working towards.
Yeah, if you look at
anybody else for their next stop, they'll probably have to put some fuel in to get to the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that you hit the nail right on the head there, Lockie, because we look at lap 40. So they've gone this half race distance on a tank of fuel. So they know that they can go to the end of the race now. So what they're going to do is just come in, do that mandatory, just up on the jacks and off you go again. And they're going to save a heap of time. So that's what they've tried to do. They've tried to roll the dice. And TTR and everyone else, all they know now is that they've already made their bed. They've got to sleep in it now, and they've got to push on for whatever they can now, because they know that these guys are going to have a very, very quick pit stop.
They do have a very quick pit stop, but what they don't have is any sort of track position, because they've ended up 27th and 28th in the field, and a long, long way, more than 20 seconds behind the race leader. And remember what I was saying before about risk minimisation? By putting themselves this far back in the motor race, both Jared Filsell and James Scott are now very much more vulnerable to being caught up in somebody else's accident than if they've done the same length pit stop as all of the other front runners and emerged closer to the front of the field. And we're seeing it now that they're having to fight their way through slower traffic, and with every overtaking manoeuvre you make comes a degree of risk.
I think the confidence that these two have, and inside that team, they know they've got that pace on board, so they probably feel that they can deal with this traffic that they've got. So that's probably what they're rolling the dice with. And again, I think you're going to see it move up the inside. Well, we thought about it. But this is what I love about teams that don't just do line astern, same as everyone else. They're going to roll the dice. And, you know, we're saying that, you know, who knows how it's going to play out, but it could be the perfect strategy. So also, so many things can play out as far as safety cars. We don't know if that could come to fruition, but at the end of the day, they've rolled the dice, they're sticking with their strategy, and they think it's going to be a cracker. So I'm excited to see how it's all going to play out, to be honest.
Yeah, well, it sets up a fascinating conclusion to this race for us. We have gone past half race distance, so 36 laps remaining in the motor race at this stage. And Jake Burton and Madison Down have both overtaken Luke Rosella. So Rosella came in very, very early for his pit stop, lap number 18. So he was one of the earliest drivers to come in for his first compulsory pit stop. So his tyres will be quite a bit more worn than those cars that he's battling against. So it was the Synergy Sim Racing teammates that controlled this race from the outset, but as things stand at the moment, it's now Trans-Tasman teammates Jake Burton and Madison Down running in positions 1 and 2, but we're not really going to get a clear picture of how this is all going to shake out, Sam, as we get to the second and final round of pit stops as Ethan Griggold makes a move up the inside of Dylan Rudd. That's the move from ninth position.
Yeah, that's the beauty of that strategy, is that we don't exactly know how it's all going to play out. That move up the inside to Griggold there. A little bit of door handle to door handle, not too aggressive, but gets the job done. But yeah, I mean, these guys have rolled the dice, tried some different strategy, and I'm keen. I wish I had a fast forward button right now just to see how it's all going to play out. But it makes me wonder now, what does Burton and Down do? Do they know that what sort of pit stop they have to go? Do they start thinking about saving fuel a little bit just to minimise that stop time that they have to take on board for fuel? So, you know, so many different things will play out, and these guys will be thinking, wow, do we push? Do we save a bit of fuel? How do we try and stop that strategy that's been sorted out by Filsell?
It's going to be very close, because the difference between Jake Burton, our race leader, and Jared Filsell at the moment is 20 seconds. The difference in their pit stop times for their final stop is going to be about 20 seconds. So at the moment, they're probably going to come out right next to each other as things stand at the moment. The key thing will be, like I said before, it's going to come down to how much time, if any, Filsell and Scott lose while they're stuck in slower traffic.
And then take into consideration that if Burton and Down take tyres as well, their tyres will be in better condition than what Filsell is. So it's one of those things, there's so many different things to play out before we can call whether this strategy was a good idea or not. But at the end of the day, I'm thrilled that they've done it. Someone's rolled the dice and done something different.
The battles continue in the mid-pack, so Rick Kuznetsov currently sitting in position number 17. He's one of the drivers sitting in the top 10 in the standings coming into this round. He's just ahead of Sebastian Flock and Matthew Bowler at the moment. And just in behind Sean McNamara, who we saw getting bundled high and wide at turn number 1 a bit earlier on in a door-to-door battle with Rehan Leonage, who is currently in position number 25. And has Jared Filsell right behind him. This will be a great experience for young Rehan battling it out with the reigning series champion.
I've had moments like this where I've been in Rehan's position, and what I've done is just roll over the throttle, let the guy go, and watch what he does. You can pick up so much from just following a guy of the calibre of Jared Filsell, and just see where he positions his car, where he brakes, and how he goes about his racing. So I don't know I don't know if he'll be able to put up too much of a challenge for Jared. So I think the best thing for him is just to let him go and just observe.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how young Rehan approaches this. So he'll see that fuel cell's behind him. Not just going to pull over and let fuel cell go by the looks of things. They come out of the outer loop.
And he's entitled to that too. He's racing Jared for position, regardless of the strategy. Like, you know, that is for position. So he's more than, you know, happy to hold him up if he wants. He couldn't care less whether Jared fuel cell's going for the race win or not. That's the card that he's been dealt.
Jared gives Leonage a bit of a love tap there on the exit of turn number 9, the final corner. This has actually allowed James Scott to close in as well. So Leonage is going to make a bit of a fight out of this one with Jared fuel cell, and this is what I said, this is the danger of Jared fuel cell getting caught up in slower traffic and losing time to the race leaders.
This is what TTR will be licking their lips about when they hear, you know, Burton and Down hear that fuel cell's stuck in this little battle. That'll be music to their ears. So Jared will make that move up the inside. Looks like Rian's just going to roll out of a little bit. Good heads-up racing there, Rian. Well done, mate. Just sit there and watch and see how Jared goes about the way he races. So you'll learn so much, and I reckon that's really good heads-up racing there from Rian.
Look at the focus on young Rehan's face there as he tucks back in behind Jared fuel cell. He'll have James Scott up behind as well, so he's in a sandwich of Trans-Tasman, sorry, I'll get it right eventually, Synergy Sim Racing Commodores at the moment.
I think the good thing for Rehan and for any driver that wants to take part in these series is if you get to race the likes of Burton and Down and Fuel Cell, is to save the races, go back and watch their in-car, because you can learn so much from the way these guys attack the corners. You know, everyone brakes differently. They brake earlier, they brake later, they do different things. So you can learn so much from these guys, and what I encourage anyone to do is just go back and watch some of these in-cars about how these guys go over a 20-lap run.
And the good thing about iRacing is you can actually look at people's brake and throttle traces and look at exactly how they're on the brakes and how much throttle they're using in their turning and braking points as well. Here is Luke Rosella, so now starting to fade with those tyres wearing out, drops the spots of Josh Anderson in turn 8. And Brady Myers lining up for a move now as well as they exit the final corner. And Myers, does he get down the inside into turn number 1? Yes, he does.
Yeah, that was all tyres and grip. You could just see how much confidence that Brady had just broken into that zone, that he knew he had the grip underneath him and just got the job done, and he's already starting to pull out on him now. So, yeah, car's looking good, but unfortunately, rolling the dice and going that early, sometimes you just got to play this part of the race out. But check out the margin that these guys have got. Burton and Down have got a 4.5-second margin over O'Shea. So, yeah, I don't think they're saving fuel. They're pushing on because, you know what, they've probably been told that Jared's in those little bit of battles, and this could probably work out nicely for their favour.
They have gained a bit of time. It was 20 seconds between them and Jared Fuel Cell a few laps ago. With some of the time that Fuel Cell has lost stuck in that slower traffic, it's now out to about 21.5 seconds. So they have opened up a bit of space on Jared Fuel Cell. Will it be enough when we get to that final round of pit stops? That's the big question, as we see that Luke Rosella on those worn tyres has decided that enough's enough and he's coming in for his final stop.
I like how the strategy played out with Luke, though, because it did bring him into the thick of it. So now, obviously, he has to take that pain of putting on, tyres and having his pit stop now. But when this all filters round, he may sort of be back in it. So I reckon it's a good roll of the dice for him at this stage. Well, a little bit of contact.
James Scott up the inside, and Leonage wants to try and take advantage as well, because James Scott opened the door. He's not quite able to get the overlap on Brian Wall. But the thing here is that, yes, you're right, Luke Rosella, he had to go through that segment of the race where he was on worn tyres, but the benefit for him is that he's now going to come into a segment of the race where he'll be on fresher tyres than everybody. So it could be that once the final round of pit stops plays out, he'll still end up in not a bad strategic position overall. However, it was a very long pit stop for him, 38 seconds for his second stop, so that will be a bit costly compared to some of the others.
I love how some of these teams roll the strategy. I think, you know, to be in the mindset of these teams where they think about how they're going to attack these races, I just love it. You know, some people have got the guts to go for it. Some people just go line of stern. Ooh, talking about a bit of side by side here. Gillian. Oh, they're going to go through. No, good smart racing. You don't want to go through. We've already seen how ugly it can get when you go side by side through there. But it'd be really good to delve into some of these teams and see how they go about their strategy, especially on a race weekend like this where the racing is so close and the times are so incredibly close, and how you go about that and whether they've got, you know, the guts to go against some of those tricky strategies.
With Blake Warboys at the moment. He's a bit further back down in 28th position at this stage, but his first pit stop was relatively long, so he's another one who might make up some spots once the second round of stops play out. Jared Filsell and James Scott continuing to work their way forward. They're up to positions 20 and 22 respectively. Jared Filsell though now almost 22 seconds behind our race leader, Doug Burton.
Yeah, pretty much since they left pit lane, I think. So now that this is where they start to coming across these cars, thankfully there's only one car. As you look at that track map as they just go through the bus stop chicane, so it's pretty much working in their favour as far as having that clear track available. But it's just a different story, obviously, for James Scott and Jared Filsell. But, you know, at the end of the day, I'm just waiting to see just how it goes. I'm just hoping for that nail-biter finish. I know these drivers in the seats of these things don't want that closeness, but I tell you what, if it comes down to an absolute last lap cracker, I'll be on the edge of my seat.
This is a good battle. So this is the contest for third position between Dylan O'Shea, Josh Anderson, Grady Myers and Thomas Freeman. So Dylan O'Shea, he stopped quite early because he sustained a bit of damage with contact earlier on in the race, so he's another one who's going to be a bit vulnerable on worn tyres. Anderson up the inside. Nice, clean, authoritative move into turn number one. Job done. And Brady Myers will be lining up O'Shea from very shortly as well. Thomas Freeman also stops very early, back on lap number 15, but showing some pretty good speed at the moment. He's staying well in touch with this group of cars.
I was just looking at that, and Freeman's up 17 positions from where he started. So, yeah, he's really doing a good job so far. Obviously, still a lot to play out with another pit stop and everything else, but good to see that progress as he made up 17. That's impressive.
Jared Filsell continuing his march forward up to 18th position, and it'll come as a bit of a relief for Jared Filsell as we see Thomas Freeman being overtaken by Brady Myers at turn one. I was just going to say that, as Jake Maloney has come in, so he makes his second pit stop at this point, but just on the Jared Filsell situation, he's now got a bit of clear track. He's 3.6 seconds behind the next car up the road. So a bit of relief for Jared Filsell after quite a few laps of having to work quite hard in negotiating slower traffic.
Hedge your bets, Lockie. You want to be in the Sim Synergy stable or the Trans-Tasman stable?
At the moment, probably the Trans-Tasman stable, just because they've got track position and the risk of getting involved in an accident's a lot lower for them at this stage. Shaping up for a blockbuster finish, though.
Well, Rehan trying to make that move. Now they're going to go side by side. There's going to be three of them battling it out into this braking zone. Oh, they're going to go three wide. Is he going to get the job done? Oh, they think about it. Nice, smart heads-up racing by everyone. That could have got very ugly very quickly. But, man, it's always hold your breath stuff when someone thinks about going three wide.
That was Thomas Hinds who was able to get through on the inside there of Leonage and tucks in behind Brian Borg. Brad Rattu and Blake Warboys both coming in for their second compulsory pit stops. First car in the queue to have made 2 pit stops at this stage is Brenton Hobson. Four laps to go in the race. They're 23 this time around.
It's funny, just as you said that, I was just doing the numbers and thinking, right, now they're at the stage of the race where they're like, you know, we touched on it before, they've made their bet, now they've just got to push on. And now Burton and Down have got that gap to Anderson, 6.5 seconds now. So, is it going to be enough for the pace that they've got? I'm just wondering, because you touched on before that Fuel Cell now has a little bit of space around him. He can probably push on a tiny bit, but that margin now to Fuel Cell is now nearly 23.5 seconds. So still slowly falling back as Burton and Down push on.
The one who's sort of taken a bit of an each-way bet is Ethan Grigalt, because his pit stop time, 30 seconds, it was sort of in between. It was not as long as either Fuel Cell or Scott, but it was also longer than the likes of Jake Burton and Madison Downs. So Ethan Grigalt, the other one that I'm interested in to see where he pops out when the final round of stops plays out.
Just looking at those times next to the drivers' names. That's their last lap pace. So Burton and Down doing 8.3s and 8.2s. Fuel Cell and Scott 8.4s. So a little bit of an advantage to Burton and Down. It's not a massive bit, but just to have that little bit of pace in their pocket is just slowly opening that margin again.
Yeah, and Ethan Grigalt last time around at 8.2 as well. So his pace is pretty good as well. And in fact, he's not too far away from this battle, sitting in 6th position at the moment. So there he is, just at the back of the shot there, in behind Dylan O'Shea and just ahead of Dylan Rudd. There he is on screen, Ethan Grigalt, the Evolution Racing Team car. So I reckon when this final round of stops plays out, he is going to be in the mix as well, based on the fact that his pit stop should be somewhere around 8 or 9 seconds quicker than Burton and Down, you would think. So what this could be shaping up for, Sandman, is a finish where we've got 5 or 6 cars that all end up pretty much on top of each other once this final round of pit stops is complete.
Absolutely. And if it's the case with a couple of laps to go and Burton Down take tyres, I think I'd rather be in their stable, because you do want that rubber to attack. You know, you could have that pace where, you know, they can push on. They won't have to worry about fuel. They'll be able to be aggressive as they can, as we see Dylan O'Shea heading with the pits. But Fuel Cell on that, you know, even though they've made that number, they'll have enough to go to the end, no problems, but they won't have to worry about fuel whatsoever, so they can push as hard as they want. But for me as a driver, I want that grip underneath me. I want those 4 fresh Dunlops that are maybe in a little bit better condition than the guys I'm racing.
And in iRacing, you can do tyres and fuel simultaneously. So the drivers that take on fuel, they'll put tyres on as well. Whereas for the likes of Fuel Cell and Scott, who've got a very quick pit stop, they probably won't take tyres, so they will have the disadvantage of being on older tyres than the cars that they're potentially going to be racing against in this last stint, as we get into the last 20 laps of round number 5 of the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series at Watkins Glen, coming to you tonight with Steve Sandman Clark and myself, Lockie Mansell, in commentary through the Race Stars TV broadcast on all of the social media platforms for both the Pro Invitational Series and Motorsport Australia.
The thing that's getting juicy for me now, Lockie, is that Burton and Down are starting to come up to a little bit of traffic, so they're going to have to go through what Fuel Cell and Scott had. They had sort of those cars in front of them that would block them a little bit, so we can see this is Burton on screen. And if we look forward, you can see a bunch of cars that they're going to have to start dealing with. The good thing, I guess, that they've got in their favour is that those drivers will be getting that blue flag. So they are going to have to take that into consideration, but it still won't be smooth sailing. And it always puts you off a little bit as a driver, regardless of how fast you are. Even if the guys are moving out the way for you, sometimes it's just enough to put you off a little bit, and it can cause you to drop a couple of tenths pretty easily.
One of the Trans-Tasman cars there, I think that might have been Richard Hampstead, who's had a troublesome night in that car, just getting right off the track to make sure that his teammates did not get impeded whatsoever. But Luke Rosella just shows how quickly fortunes can change. As in they come, they've decided they don't want to get caught up in lap traffic. They have dived straight for the pits for what is a critical stop. With 20 laps to go, the Trans-Tasman teammates of Jake Burton and Madison Down are in the pits. And that puts Josh Anderson through to the lead ahead of Ethan Briggolt and Dylan Rudd.
That's good racing. That was good strategy there from TTR as far as getting these cars in, because they didn't need to be balked by that traffic. So now they're looking forward to see where Phil Sell and Scott is. They've just crossed the start-finish line. And we're just waiting for them to see what the difference is as far as where Down and Burton come out. So they're still in the lane. And Phil Sell and Scott are already... I'm trying to guess where they are. They're going through the S's, so they've got a long way to make up. Burton and Down still at there. Down and Burton have just left pit exit. So, man, that is a massive margin for them to close up.
Yeah, we'll give you the exact time once all of the times correct themselves. But, yeah, that's now roles reversed, isn't it? So...
Well, Phil Sell and that still have their pit stop too, so take that into consideration.
So the stationary time for Jake Burton and Madison Down, 24.2 seconds for Burton, 24.7 seconds for Madison Down. Before they came into the pit lane, they were about 24 seconds ahead of Jared Philsell and James Scott. But we know that Phil Sell and Scott are going to have it'll basically be a 1 second stop in pit lane. So I still reckon it's going to be a wide ball. What Burton and Down really have to do now is push on hard and make the most of the fresh tyres that they have at their disposal.
Absolutely, and the beauty that they'll have too is that little bit of traffic, clear track. They don't have to worry about traffic too much, so they can just push. You can use up what they've got. You pretty much get an understanding that Scott and Phil Sell aren't going to take tyres. It'll just be a quick up on the jacks, off they go again. So they'll have tyres to burn in their back pocket. So Burton and Down will be thankful for that. But now it's just a strategy as far as how long are these guys going to run before they make that pit stop.
And the other key thing that happened on that previous lap is that Ethan Griggolt came in for his second pit stop as well. He's come back out onto the track 3.1 seconds behind Burton and Down, so in the mix but just far enough behind that he's not going to have the slipstream advantage. We'll look to the back of the shot and hangs the next car back behind. So not quite as close to the two Trans-Tasman Racing teammates as I thought that perhaps he was going to be, but he's still going to be somewhere in the mix once this final round of pit stops shakes out.
What doesn't put him
in the pits, and so too Michael Taliancic. So Phil Sell and Scott now the only two cars on the track that are yet to take their final stop.
Sorry, Lockie, I was getting a bit too excited, but he's still in a good spot because you just never know how this will play out. This battle between Phil Sell, Scott, Burton and Down, if they all come together, Grigolt's there for the slim pickings, just so, although he's a little bit, off the pace a little bit as far as, not as close to Down and Burton as he'd like, he's still put himself in a pretty good position depending on how this all plays out.
What I will predict at this point is that you'd have to say that based on Phil Sell, Scott, Burton and Down being the four cars that look most likely to take victory in this race, we are headed for our first double race winner of 2023 because they are the four drivers who have won races so far this season.
Oh, racing for these guys. Oh, how's the rejoin? That was very, very close.
Dylan O'Shea defending from Josh Anderson, who's come out a bit further back after that round of pit stops.
The gap down with Burton down to 19 seconds now. I think you called it might have been out to 20, 23, 24 seconds at one stage. Contact, he's gone round. Oh, big spin. Could this be a safety car? Looks like they've managed to get away with it. A big save there from O'Shea. He went round sideways, kept it off the Armco, but boy, oh boy, a little bit of contact through there. That's the last thing they need. They were holding their breath for sure.
happening in a very fast part of the racetrack as well, and that was pretty serious competition between those drivers. Here's a replay, bottom right-hand corner of the screen. Josh Anderson up the inside. Oh, yeah, you do not want contacts there heading up the hill. Gee, I'll tell you what, all three of those drivers did extremely well to keep it out of the Armco.
How did they all get away with that? That's unreal. Look at that, just sideways, right in front. He's just like holding his
Hayden
breath.
Geld was unbelievably lucky there not to get involved in a massive pile-up. He was just able to squeeze through on the inside.
That was cool. That margin now.
Go. And here we are. So, Jared Filsell, your leader from James Scott. There's still just 0.2 of a second separating these two Synergy Sim Racing cars. They have a margin of 18.5 seconds back to Jake Burton, who sits in position number 3 at the moment. I'm not sure that that's quite going to be enough as Filsell comes in and James Scott stays out, so they do not mirror each other's pit strategies. We'll watch this stop with interest because this is going to tell the story of how this race is going to play out. I don't think that the 18 seconds is going to be quite enough of a margin, because once you take into account the transit time and the fact that he still has to come in, stop, it's going to take a second or 2 seconds to raise the car up and drop it again. There we go. Stop. Car up.
Oh.
Car down. That was probably a bit slower than I expected. And out comes Jared Filsell, and he's fallen.
He's back in ninth.
To ninth.
Yeah, that's caught me by surprise, to be honest. I don't know. I expected it to come out a lot closer than that.
So you'd have to say that the strategy's backfired based on that.
Well, considering that Scott still has to make his pit stop, so he's going to come in at about around where Filsell is, possibly behind him, and that puts him, what, 20... So Filsell at the moment is 27.5 seconds off Scott as the leader.
So this is shaping up as a 1-2 finish for Trans-Tasman, you would have to say, unless James Scott can have some sort of blinding pit stop. But the thing here is that Jared Filsell's stationary time in pit lane was 4.7 seconds. Even if James Scott can have a quicker stop, even if it's only 1 second, it's still not going to be quick enough based on the transit time.
Yeah, so Filsell's still got a 10-second deficit to Burton. So even with that 4 seconds, even if it was just a stop, he's still going to come 6 seconds behind. So yeah, it quite hasn't played out for them. I guess it was at the point where Down and Burton just sort of pushed on and went hard as they could. And now they've obviously got fresh tyres to burn now, and they're just slowly bringing that margin now. It's down to just under 17 seconds now between Burton and Scott, but obviously Scott has to make that pit stop.
It's a daring strategy from Synergy Sim Racing, but ultimately it looks like it's one that's going to have backfired, and you would have to say that a lot of that time that they spent having to negotiate their way through slower traffic is what has cost them in this race. It was looking so good for them, wasn't it, earlier on? They were in control, Jared Filsell and James Scott, before the first round of pit stops, but that strategic decision to do the really long first pit stop looks like it may have backfired.
Yeah, well, when we were looking at pit stops as far as Filsell, I mean, he found himself, he had about a second margin over Jake Burton there at one stage before they pitted. So, yeah, they were close and they were in it, but unfortunately they've driven themselves out of this contention. So it looks like by the time Scott makes his pit stop, looks like it's going to be a cruisy 1-2 finish for Trans-Tasman Racing with Jake Burton and Madison Down. But the thing that this impacts the most is James Scott, because obviously he's our series leader coming into this round, so he will take a little bit of a hit in the points. So we'll just be interested to see where he comes out as far as rejoining the racetrack and where he finishes.
Well, as things stand at the moment, he will lose his championship lead, James Scott. If he falls back to a similar position, here he comes now.
Yep.
So they are able to answer the question in terms of exactly how many positions he's going to lose. As we see that car number 36, Josh Anderson, has been given a penalty, 15 seconds. for contact with Dylan O'Shea. That was that incident that we saw heading up the hill. So Josh Anderson deems to be at fault for that one as Jake Burton goes through to officially take the race lead. And just to complete the point, as things stand at the moment, Jake Burton will move ahead of James Scott into the points lead as we take another look at this incident between Josh Anderson and Dylan O'Shea at turn number 2. Still cannot believe that Hayden Feld did not get caught up in that accident and created a massive drama there.
Now, when we were just watching that pit stop happen, we noticed that he hadn't even got to his pit stop before Jake Burton and Madison Down had got past. So, yeah, it's interesting. Where is he? Scott, he's back to 21st position. So he's fallen back. Phil Sell came back in 8th. Scott's obviously had to take on...
He was stationary for 19 seconds. I wonder if that's been a miscalculation there, because I wonder if they mucked up their pit stop settings or something, because he should have been able to have a really short pit stop just as Jared Phil Sell did. What a disaster. The championship leader. He's now further back than fullback.
So that's really going to hurt his points. We already touched on that he was going to lose positions. You know, we were guesstimating that he was going to come out sort of about 9th or 10th. But when he finds himself that far back, man, did he just not have the fuel right? Because those guys pitted on lap 40. So if you can go into the race distance at lap 40, surely you'd have enough to go towards the end.
Yeah, I can only imagine that they've miscalculated, or that they've, like I said, they've got their pit stop settings wrong in the iRacing software, where it allows you to select how much fuel you've put in the car. So anyway, it's going to be a fairly long night when it comes to the debrief of the Synergy Sim Racing team, because these are not the mistakes that you can afford to be making if you want to be winning championships.
So we're hearing that Phil Sell, obviously he didn't take tyres or fuel. So yeah, we're just trying to decode and find out what's happened with Scott, but that's heartbreaking, especially when he finds himself in P18 when he was in contention to be the potential winner of this round.
He's driving angry now as well, James Scott. Yeah. You saw him firing up the inside there, coming through the bus stop and making up a couple of spots. So, and that's really what he needs to do now. He needs to try and minimise the damage by making up as many positions as he can in this final 10 laps.
Just not sure I'd want to be in the bunker of the team for the moment. You know, you think about the possibilities that they had, and obviously, you know, regardless of whether, you know, Scott's race was going to go to plan, Phil Sell had pace. He was up there leading and taking it to Burton and stretching that gap, and then to find himself back in 8th. I mean, yeah, here he is, the possibility of losing some more spots, because he's hurting now because he doesn't have those tyres. So anyone around him have now had those fresher tyres, and it's just going to make him slip back. So
well,
the Synergy Sim Racing team will be scratching.
He doesn't have to worry about Josh Anderson, because Anderson has the penalty. In fact, the Synergy Sim Racing team would do well to let Jared Phil Sell know that at the moment, so that he doesn't risk getting bundled off the road while battling against a car that he doesn't need to be battling against, as Anderson looks to do the switchback. And Phil Sell's car's sliding around all over the place. It's out of tyres, obviously. And again, he really just needs to be in damage limitation mode at the moment. So the top 10 at this stage, Jake Burton, your race leader, ahead of Madison Down. They've got a margin of just under 4 seconds over Ethan Griggolt. Then we go back to Dylan Rudd, Andrew Gilliam in 5th position, Brady Myers, Robert Gibbs. Jared Phil Sell has recaptured that position from Josh Anderson. No, he hasn't. Anderson back ahead. And Brad Rattu inside the top 10. Been a good night for Brad Rattu. He's on target for potentially his best race result of the season so far.
Still hard racing here, just outside the top 10. These guys not given an inch. They know that we're running out of laps slowly. Lap 71 of 77. But I think Scott now is just in damage limitation mode, because, you know, at the end of the day, he found himself, is he back in 21st, and now he's in 16th. So he's just slowly picking up a couple of positions. But Man, that'll be huge disappointment out of that team because of how strong they are and how, you know, they've got it. Oh, look, these guys racing. So Down is going to get the move done on Jake Burton. So no team orders here. Madison Down's gone and pinched it.
Well, here we go. So we were ruling the fact that we were not going to be having the Trans-Tasman versus Synergy Sim Racing battle that we'd hoped for, but it looks like these Trans-Tasman teammates might put a show on for us regardless, as Madison Down has decided that it's go time heading into the final 7 laps of this race. He sneaks ahead of Jake Burton, and this is where the game of chess starts. Do you want to be leading heading into the last lap, or do you want to be second and have the benefit of the draft?
How good is this? Regardless of what happens, these guys are just saying, you know what, let's race for it. Does Burton think about a dive off the inside? No, he doesn't. But have a look at these guys still, side by side, by side by side. Oh, a little bit of contact there. Lucky that that's all paved there and wasn't gravel trap. That could have got a lot uglier. But these guys aren't giving an inch. They're racing hard. This is for a battle inside the top 10.
Yeah, Brad Ratu and Wayne Burke getting stuck into it there. Big braking duel down into turn number 1. And Jared Filsell just ahead. He is way out of tyres. He is out on his feet, Jared Filsell, and he is in serious danger of being gobbled up by this pack of cars.
Yeah, if these guys just get line astern, they should have no problems, you know, getting the job done on Jared because of the tyre difference. But what he wants to see is what they're doing is they're squabbling in the background. They're trying to make moves up on each other, and this is helping Jared because he's just eyes forward hitting his marks. He knows he hasn't got the rubber to fight him, but if they start tripping over each other, that's going to work in his favour.
And the other thing that's slightly awkward there is the laps car of, I think it might be Luke Rosella as well.
This is a swap for the lead again. So Burton getting the move done back up the inside of Madison Down, sorry.
Indeed, so they've swapped positions once again. So this is, again, it's the game of chess. So it's going to be, do you want to be leading or do you want to be trailing heading into the final lap? I reckon we might see more than one positional swap between these two cars in the next 4.5 laps. The battle for the final podium position is on as well because Ethan Rigault is not safe, not by a long shot. Dylan Rudd wants another podium finish for the 9.5 SimSport team, and he's going to chase Ethan Rigault all the way to the flag, but he has to watch his mirrors as well because Dylan Rudd has got pressure from Andrew Gilliam and Brady Myers.
Gibbs is right there. Yeah, so you can go from 3rd to 7th in a blink of an eye.
So the blockbuster finish that we hoped for, it is going to eventuate. We've got an awesome battle on for the lane between the two Trans-Tasman Racing teammates. And we've got a river battle heating up for position 3 involving no less than 5 cars.
I love that the fact that TTR have just gone, you know what, you guys have put yourselves in a good position to take the win. We're not going to order you and say who should win the race. Oh, big joint, contact!
Thomas Freeman in the fence. That's coming out of turn number 9, the final corner. He was stuck in an awkward position there trying to go round the outside of Brad Ratu. Jared Filsell is just battling to try and hold position there. And in fact, he's been overtaken by James Scott.
Yeah.
So Scott on fresher tyres has now moved ahead of Filsell. So it turns out that the longest stop for James Scott to put tyres on has actually proved beneficial. And James Scott, in what has been so far a very good recovery drive from what has been a suboptimal strategic decision, is on target to at least salvage something out of tonight.
Does Gilliam think a move? No, he thought about a move up the inside here, just didn't want to make that move on Rudd. These guys know that there's a lot playing out over the next couple of laps. It's all about getting that car position, and if you can pull it up, make that move. You don't want any last lap or last couple of corner mistakes where you start turning someone round and get the possibility of a penalty.
So final battle for the podium. Ethan Rigault under some serious pressure. Can he hold on? There's Wayne Burke. So Burke has moved up to 9th position ahead of Brad Ratu, who maintains his spot inside the top 10 just ahead of Dylan O'Shea. O'Shea down the inside of Ratu, though, heading into turn number 1. So Ratu gets shuffled back to 11th. And watch James Scott. He'll be fired up. And he will be determined to try and get a top 10 finish out of a race that promised so much earlier in the evening.
Greg Galt's looking at his mirror just going, wow, how much pressure's happening behind him. He can see, and we touched on before, just how quick he could go from P3 back to P7 in a blink of an eye. So he knows that the pressure's going to be right on him for the next couple of laps. And all he's doing is looking at his rearview mirror, trying to hit his marks and just make sure he doesn't make any mistakes. Because the last thing he needs is for someone to make a move up the inside. If Gilliam or Rudd start to put a nose there, he can find himself slipping back a couple of positions. Gilliam, big move up the inside. Nice move under brakes. Oh, he's got to be careful of the crossover though. Rudd's going to go for a move up the inside. They're going to go side by side through here. Who's going to give? They can't have contact through here. We've already seen how ugly it got, but they've managed to hold on, and Gilliam now into fourth.
Gilliam was lucky there as the battle for the lead is reignited. We're on the penultimate lap of the race. And it's still not done yet, this contest between the two Trans-Tasman teammates for the race win. It's Burton holding on for the time being, but only just. And Ethan Grigol with Gillian battling it out with Rudd behind has managed to extend a bit of breathing space in the contest for third position. James Scott has come back up to ninth. He was all the way down in 20th position after the pit stop, but he has fought hard to get that car back up inside the top 10 to turn what could have been an absolutely disastrous night into a night that at least is going to net him some points. Last lap coming up here in round number 5 of the Logitech Jeep Pro Invitational Series. The white flag waves, and it's going to be the Trans-Tasman Racing teammates who are battling it out for the race win. 0.16 of a second as all that separates Jake Burton from Madison Down as they commence the final tour of the Watkins Glen circuit. And Madison Down with a big coming from his teammate heading up towards the bus.
He's coming.
Burton knows it. He drives it down the inside of the road, down to the outside. He'll get the overlap. They'll go side by side into the braking zone. But Down has to tuck back in behind Burton, who drove a beautiful racing line through the bus stop to cover off any overtaking opportunity. There will only be a couple of chances left, maybe one more chance for Madison Down to overtake. He needs to get a really, really good run out of the outer loop. I don't think he's going to be quite close enough. 2 more corners left for Jake Burton to negotiate. And Trans-Tasman Racing, they didn't qualify as well as their opposition, but when it comes to racecraft and race strategy, they have been exemplary tonight. It's going to be a 1-2 finish, and it's going to be Jake Burton. Is it? Yes, just. He becomes the first double race winner of 2023.
And Greg Galt managed to hold on for third. What a great battle. Scott now finds himself up to P9. So good bounce back for what could have been an absolute disastrous result. He's managed to get those last couple of positions. But boy, oh boy, hats off to Trans-Tasman Racing. They let those guys race. They didn't say, let's have team orders and Jake should finish in front of Madison. They both took it to the end and they both had a red hot go. What an awesome finish. Oh, contact at the end. Oh, big carnage. That looks like Phil Sells involved as well. Oh, his night's gone from bad to worse. Who would have picked it? Absolute disaster for Phil Sell.
He just cannot take a trick this season. He qualified on pole position. He led the race, but that pit stop decision to do the long first pit stop and then the decision not to take tyres in the second pit stop, it has backfired majorly. Here it is.
Oh,
coming out of the last corner, he copped a hit from behind and just managed to keep him out of the fence there, but it was on the correction that he made contact with at least one, possibly more other cars and ended up getting carted back into the wall on the outside of the track. He finishes down in position 24. It has not been the opening to the season that our reigning champion would have planned or wanted.
Who would have picked that? I mean, if I'd have told you just before those round of pit stops that Phil Sell was going to finish back as far as he did, you wouldn't have believed me. I mean, yeah, I don't know. Synergy Sim Racing really have to go back and look at that one. They let that race slip between their fingers, I guess. You know, take nothing away from TTR. They had good strategy, they had good pace, they got the job done. But man, what could have been a 1-2 for Synergy Sim Racing turned out to be a 1-2 for Trans-Tasman Racing.
They are going to have some serious soul searching to do after tonight. Let's confirm your results. 0.085 of a second was all that separated to Trans-Tasman Racing teammates in the run to the checkered flag. Ethan Griggold getting home in third position for the Evolution Racing team. Andrew Gilliam in fourth. Then it was Dylan Rudd, another strong result for the 9-5 SimSport team. He's putting together a very solid season so far. Brady Myers in sixth, and then Robert Gibbs, good result in seventh position. Josh Anderson crosses the line eighth, but he will get relegated back with that 15-second penalty for the incident coming out of turn number one. James Scott, good recovery drive tonight that'll actually become eighth with the penalty for Anderson. And then Wayne Burke crossing the line in 10th position ahead of Brad Rathu, who will get his best result of the season. Matthew Bowler, Dylan O'Shea, Rick Kuznetsov, back to Jake Maloney, Thomas Freeman, Luke Rosella, who led the race for a while but got shuffled back in the second round of pit stops, Adam Briggs, Sebastian Flock and Brenton Hobson completing your top 20.
Tell you what, Synergy Sim Racing and Jared Filsell were the talk after the last round at Spa, and I think unfortunately they're going to be talk of this race as well because of everything that just went absolutely pear-shaped. I mean, it's I guess it's easier to say from back in our spot where we don't really know what was happening on behind the scenes, but they put themselves in a terrific position to have this race run and won in, to basically have a 1-2, and it slipped through their fingers. So yeah, they're a little bit of soul searching, and once they debrief and work out what happened, hopefully they can learn from this and come back even stronger. But it looked like a fairy tale bounce back for Filsell after the dramas that we saw at Spa. Obviously grabbed pole position, had his teammate in Scott there for second, and we thought it was looking for a 1-2, which would have been, like I said, an absolute fairy tale, but unfortunately it just didn't go their way.
No, they made what seemed to be a very bold strategic call, which completely backfired, and maybe they would have been better served with doing a more conventional strategy. But Jared Filsell, everything that can go wrong for this season has gone wrong. Multiple incidents in retirement from the first round at Sebring. Round 2 at Phillip Island, he got a race win, but he also got a penalty in the other race. Round 3 at Spa, again a penalty, and then an appeal that did not go in his favour and cost him 100 championship points. And then tonight, pole position, led the race, looks to be in control, went for an alternate strategy, it didn't pay off. He was slipping back on worn tyres and ultimately bundled into the wall, coming out of the last corner and finishing in a lowly 24th position. So very shortly we'll be doing the podium presentation and press conference with our top 3 place getters here on the Race Stars TV network. It's been great to have your company tonight, whether you've been tuning in on the social media channels for the Logitech G Pro Invitational E-Series, or it's been great to have coverage tonight on the Motorsport Australia social media channels. Hope you have enjoyed the broadcast tonight. And Jake Burton, like I said, the first double race winner of the season, and according to my rough and very dodgy maths, he will now also become your championship leader at the conclusion of this weekend.
The real turn of events, I touched on it a little bit with Jared Filsell, that Jake Burton, that the season that he's had compared to last year, he had a couple of good runs, but then his season went a little bit pear-shaped. But for him to be as strong as he is with the Trans-Tasman team, I think he obviously really gels well with these guys, and his pace is showing that. We'd find there was races last season where he'd be up the front and then just slowly disappear down the back and have dramas, but he was up the front all night long. He had a strong car, and him and the whole TTR team did a terrific job.
They sure did. And speaking of Jake Burton, our race winner, he joins us in the commentary box. A fantastic race win tonight, Jake, for the Trans-Tasman racing team. But earlier in the evening, it didn't look like it was necessarily going to go your way tonight.
Yeah, pretty happy. Sorry, guys, I actually lost my voice, so excuse that. But just pretty shocking qualifying, to be honest. Didn't get a good lap in the tow and made a few mistakes, but we knew the car pace was good, so we just had to wait for the other two to stuff up, and then it was pretty much just Mads and I to the end.
Can you believe the strategic decision that the two Synergy Sim Racing drivers made to do the really, really long first pit stop, because it buried them back in the pack?
Yeah, we were saying that it looks like they've tried to, or accidentally auto-filled or filled the whole tank up or something, because they've actually taken too much to even take tyres in the second pit stop, which was really weird. I'm guessing it was a mistake because they've got some pretty clever guys in there who normally wouldn't make those kind of mistakes. So lucky for us, but we'll take what we can get when we get it.
Good battle though, even though obviously the Synergy Sim Racing Challenge evaporated in the second half of the race. You still had a pretty speedy teammate in Madison Down that you had to fend off. You swapped positions a couple of times there in the last 10 laps. How was the battle with Madison?
It was good. I think we both sort of agreed to keep it clean because Ethan was coming pretty fast. He was definitely a risk late in that race, and then sort of the last 5 laps came round and it was on. So I think both of us probably had the speed to win. I was just fortunate to have the track position, I think.
We've actually got Madison joining us in the commentary box now as well, and we'll have a chat to Madison straight away. First up, Madison, congratulations on an epic save on the opening lap. Both Sandman and myself cannot believe that you kept it out of the fence. How relieved were you to get through that one unscathed?
Yeah, it's not the position you want to be that early in the race, and I just commented to the TTR guys then that I've just about forgotten about it, and I went back and looked at the replay, and yeah, wow, that was a massive save, and it was so close to either going in the fence or going around, and my fear was kind of rotating the thing in front of a 40-car field. Would have been a massive crash up the hill. So very lucky to get away with that one and not lose too much time, but really good race. We're satisfied with it.
Yeah, well, you obviously fought back really strongly after that because you fell back to about 10th position, but you got back up into second spot. How did the rest of the race play out from your perspective?
Yeah, it was just largely about fuel saving, really. So managed to save close to 15 litres of fuel across that race. So massive amount of fuel saving most of the race was how I managed to get that track position back. But we had a really good car, so credit to everyone at TTR that worked on the setup. We went a few different directions, and I think the race pace was really strong. It looked after its tyres really well. It was really easy to put the car where you needed to put it, and at a track like Watkins, it's got such high average speed. Having that confidence in the car was really important. So yeah, the pace overall was mega, and managed to get right up back to the podium. Not quite enough for the win, but big congrats to Jake. He drove mega tonight.
We've got Sandman in the commentary box as well, and I'm sure you've got some questions for the TTR boys, Sandman.
Yeah, I'm curious to find out their thoughts when the first round of pit stops played out, because obviously Synergy Sim Racing tried something different. Did you guys think that they were still a threat, or did you pretty much think that their race was cooked at that point?
I'll jump in with that one. I think we left the lane and we just assumed they took a lot more fuel, which I believe they obviously did. We weren't quite sure what they were getting at, I guess is probably the best way to put it. So it wasn't until about 5 laps into the stint we were trying to work out where they actually came out, and we were hesitant. I think we kind of thought that they were stuffed and they were going to be nowhere, but we were also hesitant to kind of get too excited because we didn't really know what had happened, and it's always tough. I mean, we don't actually have a spotter in our Discord, so we're trying to manage this while we're driving the car as well. So it wasn't until probably halfway through the stint we worked out that they were nowhere, and something had probably gone wrong, we think.
Yeah, it's a tough one. It's got us scratching our heads here in the commentary box as well, but I want to credit yourself and Trans-Tasman Racing for you guys just letting each other race towards the end. I know there's some teams and sometimes where people will just sort of say, all right, well, let's just finish this racing order, and you'll call the shots and say, right, this person's going to finish first, this person's going to finish second. But you guys raced to the end, and I thought that was just brilliant, especially for the fans watching at home.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. To be honest, I narrowly lost a championship last year to Madison that broke my heart. So I'm not too happy when I lose to Mats. So I'll always race him pretty hard. But we just wanted to make sure that Ethan didn't get to us with sort of 10 to go, because he was really fast. He had a lot of speed, probably as much, maybe even a little bit more with a slightly better tyre than us. So yeah, it was just consolidating that. But once we knew we were clear, it was all hands in.
Speaking of Ethan, we've got him in the commentary box now as well, so we might as well drag him in for a chat. Ethan, congratulations on another podium finish. Do you think with a few more laps you could have caught and maybe challenged the Trans-Tasman guys for a win?
Yeah, look, for a bit of that last stint there, I was sort of looking in my rearview mirror a bit more than I was looking to the guys up front. So I was just trying my best to hit all my marks because I was sort of the front train car in a draft train. So that was quite stressful. And I managed to put quite a few good laps in on you. I took a few tenths out of the guys in front, but they were just far too far ahead. And like they said before, they were a little bit too clever to race each other early on, so I wouldn't get there.
Did this race kind of play out exactly the way you thought, Ethan? Obviously, you'd probably love to be up there battling for the win, but we saw you had obviously some moments there, making some moves up the inside of drivers. But when you felt that they'd sort of opened up that little bit of a margin, I say they when I should be saying Burton and Down, but when they'd opened up that little bit of a margin, did you think it was race over, or you weren't quite sure?
Yeah, look, I didn't really have much of an idea where the SSR cars went. Apparently Phil Sell's car went off on the jacks and came straight back down, so he had no tyres, and that's pretty much when I knew that they were completely out, and there was just a big gap in front of me and I had to defend from the guys behind. So, but I must admit, this weekend we had a fair bit more pace than I expected. I only really started practice on the weekend, and being the new scan of Watkins, it took me a long time to get my head around, and our set was quite a bit out there for a while until we managed to do a couple of sessions and really extract the pace out of it. So yeah, to be honest, I'm surprised that we qualified up the front. We could actually race at the front, because I was, in all honesty, expecting to be in the fence up in the S's by about lap 2 with about 30 other cars. So it was a much better result than that, fortunately.
Well, Madison nearly did it, but thankfully he held on to it, because that was going to be massive. Like he said, there was 30-odd plus cars behind him, and it could have been quite ugly. But before we let you go and we wrap it all up, we'll start with you, Jake. Have you got anyone that you want to thank before we say goodnight?
Yeah, just a massive thanks to the whole team at TTR. As Mads briefly touched on, we sort of all started with a setup and went our own sort of directions this week, but it was really good to see the team gel. I think we had maybe not the fastest car, but we definitely had the fastest car, I think, over a sort of 35 lap stint. Our tyre was great, and that's a testament to how well the team worked this week. And of course, a huge thanks to our supporters in virtual racing school as well.
And Madison, yourself?
Yeah, just echoing what Jake said. Obviously, we had a lot of different directions happening, and just seeing that teamwork and someone works something out, and then you can apply that back to other setups, and you all get a gain from it, even though they are different directions. So yeah, really great teamwork. Everyone at Trans Tasman Racing's put in good work in the last few nights, and generated a really quick race car. It actually started with a virtual racing school data pack set. So yeah, really confident that the data pack should go start with something good at Virtual Racing School. Jump on there and have a look. And obviously Virtual Racing School supports us week in, week out, and we use that data analysis platform almost nightly when we're practicing. So big thanks to them, and yeah, bring on the next round. And
Ethan, flying the flag for Revolution Race Team.
I'd just like to thank all the boys over at ART for putting in a really stout week of effort this week. The car wasn't great to start with, and a special shout out to 40 for that session that we did last night, where we spent about 2 or 3 hours really nutting down the setup and getting it somewhere. So pretty much without them, I don't think we would have had too much of a competitive car to be able to fight these boys at the front. And of course, a shout out to the greatest sponsor a sim racing team could have is Logitech G.
Just one last question for Jake before we wrap it all up. So, Jake, you're the first double race winner of this season. That win moves you to the top of the championship standings. Is it too early to be thinking about the championship? Are you going to give us that cliched answer of taking it one race at a time and the championship will take care of itself? Or are you actually starting to think about the championship at this point?
No, I was thinking about championship in the first race, mate, to be honest. It's a season with no drop rounds. You can't really make any mistakes, but the easiest way to win a championship is to win races. So we've been fortunate to finish well so far, while some of the competitors have made mistakes. So fingers crossed we can keep it going. We've got Enduros coming up, which always throws a big spanner in the works, especially without those drop rounds, as I say. So it's a big season, long way to go, but stoked to be up there at the moment.
Well done, Jake. Congratulations on a terrific win tonight, and to our other podium finishers, Madison Down and Ethan Grigault. And then that concludes round number 5 of the Logitech G Pro E-Series at Watkins Glen, presented by Motorsport Australia. In the commentary box alongside me has been Steve Sandman Clark. All of the coverage has been produced by Luke Lucas and the team at Race Stars TV. On behalf of the entire team, I'm Lockie Mansell. See you next time.